What's happening, everyone? And welcome to El Chile Boxing Talk. Got the whole crew here with us from Long Live Boxing. We've got Sean Gringo Hicks in the house, the one and only Run PMC, the hired gun of El Chile, and my homie, Nopal Boxianos. We are here, man. Already have a good time. Lots of boxing to talk about, man. So we could get right into it. Lots of news. And the first thing that we want to talk about is Mark Maxio defeating Gary Russell Jr. To become the WBC featherweight champion. And, this took some people by surprise. Some people maybe not. There was some news ahead of time that maybe Gary Russell had an injury. So let's get into it, man. Like, Sean, what'd you think about this fight, man? What's your take on talking about injuries before the fight and just all that all around? What was your overall take this weekend?
All right, so yeah, first of all, it was looking to shape up to be a fight where it was going to be, like a big, impressive upset, and then went to like, okay, it's an upset. Like, so the way Mark Maxio came out, like a house on fire, really bailing away, pushing the action, definitely working to the body, and having a lot of success. I mean, I gave him the first 3 out of 4 rounds. I was really impressed with his amount of volume that he's putting out there, and around the 4th round, he got a jab in there or like a short check hook that looked like it injured and hurt the shoulder of Gary Russell Jr. And Gary Russell Jr. was able to continue on with the fight, and credit to him. And actually, for whatever reason, a lot of the aggression that was pushed forth as far as Maxario being more aggressive and pushing the action, he was actually having a lot of trouble with the angles that was put forth by Gary Russell Jr., a lot of the lateral movement. And I felt like the momentum he had built up, I don't know if he just took his foot off the gas or he was actually gassed from the vibe he put out initially. But from that point on, it seemed like the fight kind of tightened up. Not to the point where I would say Gary Russell had the victory. I gave it 7-5 to Maxio. I could even see 8-4. It was impressive, obviously, to get the victory, and that's a big name, to get on your record. But I don't see it as impressive as it looked like it's going to be. But I do think a fully healthy Gary Russell Jr. would probably take Mark Maxio, because Mark Maxio was very green and didn't take advantage of the fact that he was injured. So if he's not comfortable going for the kill, then boxing may not be for him. So it did seem like the lateral movement did throw him off. At the same time, it seemed like a more seasoned fighter would be able to make the adjustments and just kind of work around it, so he wouldn't be able to be handled by that one hand fighting style that Gary Russell was demonstrating. And just real quick, because now people are saying it, Gary Russell Jr., I mean, a lot of fighters would have got their check and quit, so respect to him for continuing on and, actually banking some rounds and going out on his shield, so to speak. I don't agree with him thinking he won, 10 10 rounds, 9 rounds. I just can't see that. Even if you're extremely biased, you can't give somebody extra credit for, effort. But he did put on a performance. He did go out, and he was respectful to Mark Maxio at the end. But, it was Mark's night. Respect to him. And, I'm excited to have what I call a vulnerable champion with the belt. So I'd love to hear what your thoughts are. What I mean by that is basically somebody that people aren't scared to fight and is not going to hold the belt hostage. So sign me up for that.
Another Cambosis, huh?
Basically, a green champion, a green belt. Let's do it.
Run, what'd you think about this, brother?
I enjoyed the fight. I didn't officially score the fight, but I was just watching it, and even from the outset of the fight, I noticed that Gary Russell Jr., even though it wasn't nearly the same fight, he was having trouble getting in range to land his punches, at least to my eye. That he's had sort of similar problem when he faced Vasil Lomachenko years ago. He seemed to be falling short with some punches, even early on in the fight. And it just looked like he was having issues getting in range and being able to fire off on, which makes sense because he might be tentative being out of the ring, even though he always stays in the gym and always in shape. Nothing sparring and all the training is not going to be the same as when you're in the ring actually in a fight in primetime TV. So I thought he was having trouble getting in range. Then the shoulder injury, and then that was just basically all she wrote. It speaks to Gary Russell's pedigree and his ability as a boxer to be able to stay in the fight with a really young fighter that has some firepower and also win rounds with one hand.
Oh, yeah. And Nopal, what'd you think about this, man?
They don't
Well,
try to win rounds anymore.
Oh, sorry,
yeah,
no, Run. I think you kind of muted it, at least on mine for a little while. Did you have any final thoughts?
Yeah. I don't know where I muted at, but apologies for that. But I was just saying that it just speaks to his pedigree about where he about how good of a fighter Gary Russell was, just being able to stay in the fight and win rounds when other guys packing in and they're not even injured, and he did it while he was injured and with one arm. So I don't know if a rematch is warranted just yet. It sort of reminded me of another shoulder injury fight when you had Bernard Hopkins and Chad Dawson in that first fight, where Hopkins got hurt early, but that fight was stopped early, so it didn't go the full 12. But I mean, there's nothing wrong with Gary Russell's performance. Hopefully, he can get back healthy and get back in the ring. But I'm interested to see what Maxio has to offer the division.
Yeah, I mean you can look at it a bunch of ways. First off, good for Gary Russell for making it all the way. You know what I mean? He actually managed to hit Mark, with just one hand, and that's all he had. And he was still trying to block with his shoulder and stuff, sort of. And you know what I mean? So it took some effort. I mean, if anybody knows what a shoulder injury feels like, you can't even lift your arms most of the time. So that's tough, and it just shows to his true championship ability. Now, as far as the I beat that boy post-fight interview, I mean, come on, bro. But I guess he got to save face somehow. But props to him. And Mark Maxio, I guess he you can kind of tell when he actually hit Gary Russell Jr. in the shoulder and injured it. Now Gary Russell was already saying that he came in with it injured, and he was kind of nursing it back to health a little bit. So he managed to use it on those first rounds, and Mark Maxio says I'm the one that messed it up even more, I guess. But I mean, he should have capitalized a little more. Nevertheless, he did win the fight, and that's just how this sport goes sometimes. You know what I mean? Even though Gary Russell might be better than Mark Maxio, it just it's a shame that he's so inactive, and then to add insult to injury, comes back injured into a fight. Because sometimes the way we look at fighters that don't fight so often, we look at them like they're waiting for the perfect opportunity to come back. But you wait that long and then you come back and you're injured. That's just ironic, you know what I mean? And it's a messed up situation.
Man, I hear you. And right now, I'd like to give a shout out to Rider of the Storm. Thanks for joining us, brother, and Sonteo Media. Thank you guys so much for being here. Now, dude, I totally agree with you guys on pretty much all the aspects. Sean, I kind of saw it like you did. I thought that it was kind of like a 7-5 type of fight. I didn't see it as one-sided. I thought that Gary Russell Jr., under the circumstances, who was clearly injured, did good work. Like, he had very good foot movement, very good defense. Also, very kind of slick, and also doing a really good job of slowing down the pace of the fight. We're talking about 126 pounders, and dude, like, this felt like, I don't know. I mean, I've seen like more action in like light heavyweight fights, to be honest. Like, it was kind of awkward to see like such low activity. And to me, like, the lower in weight, the more I need to see those chingazos. So, but that wasn't on Gary Russell Jr. Like, under the circumstances, Gary Russell Jr. didn't have his jab going like he ordinarily would. So I think he did quite well. Like, I'm not quite a fan of like the lower weight, like peekaboo pot shot type things. Like, I think maybe that should be reserved for like maybe 147 and up for me. Like, but I did respect what Gary Russell Jr. was doing in there. I thought Mark Maxio did some things that were working, but his activity rate, or maybe his stamina, it's one of the two. Like, it's just too low. Like, I agree with you, Sean. I think that Maxio is just maybe there, to be taken at some point, certainly, although some people say that featherweight's, not the deepest division in the world. And as far as Gary Russell goes, I had a lot of respect for him, but then again, I was also kind of tired of him in a way. Like, there was a bit of like Gary Russell fatigue setting in with just his general attitude towards boxing for me. Like, I remember when I first was kind of paying attention to the lower weight classes, and I don't know what show it was on, but he was they were talking to him. He wasn't fighting that night. It was on a Showtime telecast, and he said something along those long lines of like, well, I only fight once a year because there's nobody worth fighting right now. So, that's the only reason I come out once a year. And I thought, oh, who's this dude? So I kind of kept track of him, and I've seen him since then. But hell, there was a little bit of action up top. Like, he's not really facing those top guys. I thought it was kind of weird when he wanted to go right after Terrence Crawford. And on top of that, it's been a couple years since he's been in the ring. Like, he's in no rush, and he's so good that he can just kind of be like a career boxer. But it's easy for me to say, sitting here talking about him, that, he doesn't have his heart in boxing. I mean, he's obviously very gifted, totally gifted fighter. And I think he could make a comeback. It's about how much, he wants to give to this sport. He's not getting any younger. So we'll see how he does. And Maxio, like, he just might be one of those temporary champions. But I thought the fight was slightly entertaining looking at all the dynamics. I'm not necessarily a fan of him talking about his injury ahead of time. Like, well, people are talking about their injuries before and after now. Back in the day, people just wouldn't even talk about their injuries, right? I mean, hell, we're going to rescore Martinez Cintron later. And speaking of Sergio Martinez, when his legs were all jacked up versus Cotto, he took that loss just straight up and he said, no, the better guy beat me, right? And so I don't know, this trend is something I'm not very happy with.
No, that's the interesting point, and it's something that that stood out to me, because not only the fact that he said, he had injured it 2 weeks prior, but he even went deeper in the timeline and said back in 2008 that it's basically like a reoccurring injury that's just happened and something that he had to deal with, and now he came back from it, which is also weird in itself, because you're thinking, okay, you have no problem with pushing things back. Did he have pressure? Like PBC was like, look, dude, we can't have you. If you wait any longer to fight, you're going to be eligible for the Hall of Fame. I mean, it's going to be 3 years now. So you need to go ahead and fight. We're going to put you on this card. We're trying to push Mark Maxio. Let's go ahead and get this thing going, because I think he put that out in the universe because he expected this to happen, and not to lose, but he saw the possibility of him having an injury that could cause some problems during the fight, because he adjusted, better than a lot of fighters would have quit. We can say what we want about him outside the ring, but inside the ring, he showed the heart of a champion, and I did respect that. But the comments about the 2008, I had never heard that before, and to me, when I heard that, like, well, shit, that's why you don't fight. Because you're basically rehabbing your shoulder injury, and then you hurt it real bad when you're training. You put it out there because you presumed this could potentially happen, and it did. So that was kind of my takeaways too, and for the fact in the comments you made as far as no one else at 126, there's enough interesting names where he could have put himself out there. And I'm going to go ahead and call it, because that's what I like to do on here with my bros, is that I think that we might see the unbelievable Russell eclipse where he fights twice in 1 year. There's no way he can't let this. He has to. Everything is built, his legacy, around having a belt and doing his mandatories and then gravy training that bad boy. So if we don't believe nothing else, he's going to rehab the shit out of the shoulder, and this rematch is going to happen. If it doesn't happen, he might have to go ahead and call it quits, because how can you mandatory without a belt?
Right. Great point. I forgot to mention that. Yeah, you would just hold that one belt and just be totally happy, man. Rider of the Storm here says, I believe in a rematch. Gary will beat Maxio. Gary didn't train properly for this fight due to out-of-the-ring issues with his dad, but that shouldn't take away from the win from Maxio. I agree with all of that. I believe Gary would win in a rematch. And then also, congrats to Maxio. The guy, you could tell how happy this dude is, and I'm happy to see him. Young Billy Boxing is here in the house. He's a co-host with Joseph Herron at War a Week Radio. And I've also just subscribed to him. You guys can find him here on YouTube now. He's got great takes. So, man, I'm glad I found you, brother. And then PBC Prison Warden is here. Thank you so much for joining us, man. Thank you. And then we got D-Style Boxing. But yeah, you're right. As far as the conspiracy goes, Gringo, there's been a little bit of talk about that, and I wouldn't mind talking about it. Gary Russell took to live, and he said this. He said, politics is a bad motherfucker. You know what I'm saying? I beat that boy at least 10 rounds to 2. 9-3, man. Took the old boy to school. They've been trying to get me out of the way, I guess. I don't know, but it is what it is. I outclassed him. I outschooled him. Outboxed him with one motherfucking arm. So this idea that, maybe there's some people that kind of want him out of the way. What do y'all think about that? No, Paul, what do you think about this? Do you think he's just talking mess, or is there anything behind this? Like, when you heard this, man, what came to your mind?
You know what? He rubs the guys that run the show the wrong way, and I know that, because he wants certain fights, they won't give it to him, and then he talks shit and, conspiracy and all that. So, you know what I mean? And a lot of us boxing fans like that when these guys talk bad about their employer. You know what I mean? We appreciate that. We actually like it because we're thinking the same thing he is. But so I believe so. But I also think it's like Sonteo said in the comments, he's probably getting a little bad karma from him, the way he disrespected Leo Santa Cruz's dad. You know what I mean? Rolling up on him and grabbing his chains like that. Like, you know what I mean? It could be a lot of everything just put together. As we know, Al Heyman, him and Leo Santa Cruz, they're pretty tight. That's what Leo Santa Cruz actually makes everybody believe. We don't really know if they are tight, but it looks like they might be, and this could have happened too.
Oh yeah. Great points, and as far as what Gary Russell Jr. has to say, I've been kind of listening. I've been doing the rounds. I've been trying not to hate watch. I swear, I'm trying to have a clean mind, but I heard something that was interesting. There's this channel that I really like. He drove me off, but I still listen in, and he says that, he just wasn't meant to win, and that's just how it was going to be. No matter like how it happened, that's just the way it was going to be. And, there's certain energies that people manipulate, and that's how they've been in control of boxing, just like the entertainment industry. And so, that's as far as he could have gone into it. But I thought, okay, well, like, energies, he's talking like spiritual warfare, and the one thing that I noticed is nobody's talking about the spiritual warfare that Gary Russell Jr. had going on. Look at this cold swell right here. Okay. Now, he's got a couple things going on. I want you all to take a look at his dome, right? And he's also his eye. That's the eye of Horus, right? And that's the Ankh, right? So just to give you guys a quick little preview, and on top of that too, I think I saw the tree of life on his back along with the cross. So, spiritually, Gary Russell's all over the place. Some people might think this is kind of like towards Egyptian. This is the eye of Horus. Some people think it references your third eye, the pineal gland. So he might be spiritual. Some people also might call it New Age, or some other people might call it the conscious community. So maybe he's tapping into that a little bit. And then, so, people think that it's the inner third eye. It's your spiritual antenna. That's what you get pulsating. The Hindus, Baptists, a lot of people are into it. Anybody can get it going themselves. Just something that secretes what you use when you dream. So it's like an internal DMT drip, right? So he was, and on top of that, he was putting the cold swell on a couple times, even afterwards. So I wasn't sure if he was kind of like praying to an entity, or if it was just more of like symbolism, because there's symbolism, but there's also kind of it depends how he wants to look at it. So I'm just giving it to you guys for your consideration. If you're wondering what the hell that thing
Chicano, was. that was deep, bro.
I wasn't ready, bro. It wasn't my seatbelt.
I know. Well, I thought like you guys weren't going to be ready regardless. I was like, well, who do I kick this to afterwards? Because, I wouldn't know who would be able to talk about this or even want to.
If I would, I would like to just tell Gary Russell, man, give the Si Se Puede Chapel of Guadalupe a try, man. You don't got to get into all that.
Yeah, maybe he should hire Manny Pacquiao's mom to do some voodoo on the outside. It might be successful. But he was also rocking the Ankh, in the center. And that's also known as the key of life, represents a concept of eternal life and the breath of life. So it's all circular, and it can be used as a porthole towards the other side and serve as a channel of communication to the divine. It's an amulet of spiritual healing, and it's worn for good luck and fortune. So just something for you all to take a look at. You know what I mean? I don't know if you guys are that interested in that kind of thing, but so I mean,
know.
Well, now and it's like, because I was wondering what that was, and like they put it on him, and then he put it on afterwards. I'm not sure, because if Gary Russell's saying that the powers that be were against him, I'm like, well, you're channeling other stuff that should have. I mean, shouldn't that supersede? Like I have more questions for him, but I'm not going to get them. It looks like he's not showing off. Plus, I might not see him for another year. So this just could be like, I don't know. It could just be gone. Does anybody have anything to add to that before I move on to the next thing?
Well, oh yeah, please go ahead.
I have one more thing regarding the end swell. There could have been a very easy way that he didn't need that very sophisticated end swell. Just as long as he had Stitch Duran in the corner, he could have been taken care of perfectly. No swelling, no cuts. It would have been all good, since how Chicano feels about Stitch.
Oh, he loves to hover. That guy would have been all over it. And I just want to go back to something. Okay, Sean, I took your advice, man. And to get the Casamoyer fight taste out of my mouth, I went back and watched Juan Manuel Marquez and Joel Casamoyer fight each other to also get the taste out of some of those bad fights I was watching of Juan Manuel Marquez, of like a couple of those stinkers that I had to watch. Right. Man, that was one hell of a fight.
Thank you.
Great fight. Good, sweet science back and forth, man. And Joel Casamoyer made a very good account of himself very
palate
early
cleanser,
on.
Right? Palate cleanser.
Definitely a good palate cleanser, but yeah, Stitch was hovering all over the damn place with that dude. You know what I mean? The guy fell, Stitch comes running out to save him. Like, God, he's been doing this for years. If the hate builds up, I will put together like a Stitch hogging camera time compilation video. Nobody sees it like I do. I still keep ranting about it. Nobody seems to notice it besides me, and I feel like I'm the only one talking about it. But that was one hell of a fight. Great ending by Marquez. What a finisher, man. Like, just a tremendous finisher. And, you could tell, man, he was ready to kind of get more busy, with just sitting on his shots more and just stepping up in weight. I mean, that was his step up, right? I mean, and on top of that, there was some good shit talking before that. I didn't realize that Casamoyer was doing the whole like Mexican sombrero thing.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, dude, it was good, man. So, I mean,
no, I'll go ahead and say for me, and I would love your thoughts on, not to get sidetracked, but just like in general, if you're a boxing fan, but as a Marquez fan, to me, that's a must-watch fight to go back and revisit. It's top 3 for me, and that's saying a lot because this guy had a hell of a career. So that's just my thoughts on that.
Yes, being a more of a lover of the sweet science now, I have to agree. Like, man, that fight was. I mean, if you want to watch one Manuel Marquez, I mean, that would be like at least top 5 for me. You know, I'd watch the the Pacquiao ones, and then I would watch the Baby Bull Diaz one, then this one, and then maybe the Katsidas fight. I like the Katsidas because it's one of his last really good wins, but this fight precedes that, and it's against maybe like a higher caliber opponent, and I think Casamayor had just beaten Katsidas.
Right.
So I mean, and on top of that, it was for the lineal lightweight championship. So, I mean, it was a damn good win for Juan Manuel Marquez. So I suggest that everybody go out and check that one out if they haven't had a chance to. So anybody got anything else before we move on to the next subject?
I know we got like 18 subjects. Hold us back. I mean, that's kind of what I do, but I'll go ahead and throw this out there. I want to know what you guys think as far as what's going to happen. So if Gary Russell Jr. with his third eye and the Ra and all that is probably not going to fight in 2022 again, what is Mark Maxio going to do? Do you guys think he's going to fight Navarrete? Do you guys think he's going to fight, Leo Santa Cruz on a pay-per-view, since he's Hale Heyman's favorite? I mean, there's a lot of things. He actually has a lot of options, I think, too. And what I call it, he's a vulnerable champion. I could see Kid Galahad calling him up with Eddie Hearn and like, shit, let's make it happen. Like, let's get that belt. What do you guys think is going to happen? I mean, because, the ball is in his court.
What do y'all think? I'll let you guys go first, and then I'll get my take.
I hope that I wanted to say that I hope that this fight helped Maxio realize, he almost got beat. Well, the fight wasn't close, but nevertheless, the other guy was fighting one arm. So I hope that opens his eyes to show him, that the other guy could have easily won with both hands. And, you know what I mean? It shows him that he's big, that he's vulnerable. So it might open his eyes to the level that he needs to get to hold on to the belt. So that's all I'm thinking, and I hope it serves him well. And he works on the things that that he's vulnerable in.
Yeah, and it also shows that, because we used to, or just in boxing talk in general, it used to be like once you step up and win a title, you sort of have no soft touches after that. I don't think that's necessarily something that's done anymore all the time. So Maxio might be able to learn on the job, but if you were to go off of that thinking where it's like once you're stepped up, you're only going to fight big names, he's sort of in a tough spot. I mean, he's in a spot, he has a belt where he can make some more money, but it's going to be sort of trial by fire at this point, because if you just start taking soft touches, then you're not going to really gain that much fanfare, especially in the lower weight classes. So it'll be interesting to see what he does.
Yeah, I'm curious too. I'm very happy for him if he wants to, enjoy the ride and maybe milk that belt the way Gary Russell did, and just kind of, hey, that's not a bad idea, and learn a little bit. Like, go ahead. You might only ever be a champion once. You never know. So, I mean, if he wants to take his time, maybe fight a mandatory or develop. I'm sure he learned a lot from going in there with Gary Russell Jr. He learned a lot. So I mean, whether he can apply it or not, it's a whole different thing. But he was taken to school. He won the fight, but he was taken to school, and thank God Gary Russell was limited. So I mean, he was blessed with this win. The timing was perfect for him. So let's see what he does next. Well, hey man, I want to get to our next subject. Man, some news hit us today, and Chile might be one of the first ones talking about this, and I'm happy to be talking about this. Sources are saying, and it's actually confirmed now, that Roman Gonzalez and Julio Cesar Martinez have struck a deal for a fight on March 5th in San Diego. Martinez is the 112-pound champion, will move up to 115 pounds to face Juan Francisco Estrada, who withdrew with COVID symptoms. And yeah, man, it looks like it's on. Eddie Hearn confirmed it today too. So, hey, what do you all think about this fight? Nopal, man, I want to go to you first, brother. Like, tell me, like, what do you think about this step up? What do you think about Martinez stepping up to take this fight overall? Like, what are your thoughts about this great news that we have?
Man, that's gonna be a hard fight for Martinez. I'll tell you that, bro. He's a blaster, but you know what I mean. He's moving up in weight. It's only 3 pounds, but the good thing is that he's a warrior, and it looks like he's willing to take that, and that's. But nevertheless, man, Canelo team got their work cut out for them. They got that Valdez fight now, and then this one, if it materializes. So I'm excited, man, because it's going to be either way, win, lose, or draw. It's going to be a good fight, man. And, the fans are going to be the winners in that one. But as I see it, I think that Chocolatito definitely has the advantage on this one, man.
I want to give a quick shout out to Nando Yamas in the house. Thanks for joining us, brother. And then, yeah, dude, Nando says here, hell yeah, El Rey, Julio Cesar Martinez. And you know what? I like Martinez too. Like, Estrada, or excuse me, Roman Gonzalez, I think he's pretty good. You know what I mean? But dude, I don't watch the lower weights as much as I watch like the bigger weights. But every time I watch Julio Cesar Martinez, like that guy impresses me. Like he's a bad little dude. He goes in there and he's ready to just take you out. I mean, he's truly a warrior. Like I thought 112 was his until he decided to move up. And a few pounds is not that much. If he moves up in weight, I'm happy for him. They probably have a smart team behind them. They're going to move him up steadily, and it's a great replacement fight. I do think it's interesting that one guy, Estrada, had COVID-like symptoms. Like it is what it is. He withdrew, right? But I'm wondering what that means. Like, it doesn't take much to have COVID-like symptoms. Like if you didn't test positive for it, I mean, I don't know why you're pulling out this early, but this is one hell of a replacement fight. I think that Martinez is going to beat Gonzalez, in my opinion, but I'll be curious to see because, I think that Roman Gonzalez, he's one of those guys who just kind of, the little guys who just keep throwing. So it's like, how will Martinez deal with that? Because I don't necessarily think Martinez is a guy who just like throws and throws and throws like the little guys. Like he kind of sets himself up a little bit, but he's bad. He kind of comes in and out a bit. He boxes to put you down, which is something that's, the knockouts don't always come in the lower weight classes. So that's what I have to say about it. You're muted, Sean.
Oh, I was waiting for Run.
Sorry. You're next, brother.
Okay, well, if I'm next, I'm gonna go ahead and say when I found this out, I couldn't believe it. I'm sure probably gonna pretty much go crazy in the comments and be like, "Nah, this happened. This is the most recent best replacement I can think of." Like when I found this is a replacement, this is unbelievable. Shout out to El Rey for moving up. This is something I've been kind of hoping would happen. And I know I saw El Rey, the last fight he had, which was the disappointment where he fought Arroyo and he got knocked down the first round. And he came back and just like went to another gear and just went to like just shredder mode and just like shows a lot of different angles. He does crazy stuff as far as putting his hands down and like, come on and hits himself, which I know gets the crowds, riled up. But at the same time, he does have a lot of style and technique. And, he shows you a lot of different versatile looks, which I think is, definitely exciting. Pretty high on Chocolatito. So I'm, looking forward to see how he comes out. I know that he always raises his game, other unless it's Sarang Savai. But I feel good about Chocolatito in this fight, and I think it's going to be a good one. In fact, I think it's going to be a great one. On paper, it seems like it potentially could be fight of the year. I think if we're going to see the best of both men, and there's not going to be any disappointment we're not getting a trilogy, but man, what an unbelievable matchup, and sign me up. I cannot wait. This is one of the fights we said fight party fights to me, even though it's lower class and the possibility of, a knockout is pretty, much reduced. But you never know in this one. I mean, this is going to be all action. It's going to be phenomenal.
It's definitely going to be see if Roman Gonzalez has another one in him, because honestly, after he lost back-to-back fights and the way he lost that second fight against Sorung Vasai, I thought it was over, honestly, for his career. He sort of revitalized it, but I'm wondering, like, if he just has one more in him, because I would think I would give just the younger guy the advantage. He possibly might not have as much weight because he's moving up in weight and he's young, he's growing, 26 years old versus I don't know how old Gonzalez is, but he has to be in his mid 30s at this point, and how much he sucks down in weight. I wonder how long the chin's going to still hold up, because Rungvisai broke him down and it seemed over. But I would give it's going to be a good fight, definitely a great like fight party type fight, even if it's in the lower weight classes. But I just my gut feeling is I think Martinez is going to get this one. I don't know how, but I think if I were to bet, I'd pick him to win. But who knows? Maybe Gonzalez has some more magic left in the career.
Yeah, dude, I kind of see it the way you do, Run. Like, I just think that Chocolatito might just be a little bit too old, and it just might be Martinez's time, and I haven't personally seen him face any type of adversity that I've been worried with. So, I mean, I'm on the Martinez train, but I definitely have respect for Chocolatito. And I also agree that it sucks that we can't get that trilogy. One of the controversial Rescore fights that I was hoping to revisit would be in the lead up to their third fight. A lot of people said that first fight was a robbery. Now, something I was sitting on. I don't know if maybe we'll just check that one out in the lead up to this particular fight, since we're kind of running out of controversial fights and we're going to be closing up that series soon. But man, I'm definitely looking forward to this fight. Does anybody have any final thoughts before we move on to the next subject? All right. Doesn't look like it, man. And we got some other big breaking news. just recently, man, he was hitting us, dude. So let's get into this. It looks like Virgil Ortiz Sr. has told ESPN that he's going to train his son, Virgil Ortiz Jr., alongside Manny Robles ahead of the Michael McKinson fight on March 19th. Ortiz Sr. said they spent a few weeks with the Canelo gym in San Diego, but that they didn't mesh with Eddie Reynoso's availability for this particular fight. So what do y'all think about this, Sean? What do you think about this matchup? Manny Robles, Virgil Ortiz. What do you think, man?
I like it, man. I like it a lot. I'm really high on Manny Robles, and I think this is great. For the one thing, I think if the real cause and issue that kind of had forced a wedge because the availability, I was having concerns going as great as Eddie Reynoso was, going into another high-profile trainer that's going to have a lot of guys that demand his time and availability, especially 2022, like pretty much every year is going to be big for him, with so many big fights and so many big headline fighters. So I'm happy for Manny, actually, and I think it's going to be a good pairing. I look forward to it. I want to see the adjustments that, if they can be made, and the pairing I think is a good one, and I'm excited for it. I'm looking forward to see how it plays out. And also, too, this is not a night for the next opponent, but it's a good fight for that to be the next fight because respect to his next opponent, he's not as big of a threat as Kavalauskas was, Mean Machine. He's still, obviously he's going to be a tough opponent, but, it's not like he's going in there with like an upper tier, top 10 guy, so we'll see. And I'm looking forward to it, and I'll hold judgment as far as like how it works out. But initially when I heard it, I'm excited, and I can't wait.
I think it's a great pairing. I mean, in the end, it seems that Virgil Ortiz Sr. is, even though he might not be labeled as the head trainer or he might not be seen by the public as the head trainer, he's most likely the head trainer, and it always is going to be in his son's career. So, like I said, I think we touched on this on probably a few episodes ago now, was that Sean Porter did similar things about with him and his dad Kenny, as they would go to Wildcard, learn from Freddie Roach and assistants, and move on, go to different gyms throughout Vegas and learn, go have camps with Barry Hunter out in Headbangers in DC and learn. So that might be something that Virgil Ortiz is doing, is just picking up little things here and there. And that's what you do. You just learn from people that you might think in areas you might be deficient in, just to bring up your own areas, or just strengthen your strong points as well. That there's no shame in that. But I'm happy for Manny Robles too. I mean, I don't know him personally, but just from seeing him, he seems like a solid trainer and a good overall guy. And he lost some big guys in the last few years. He lost Andrew Ruiz after the debacle, or not really his debacle, but it's more of just how Andy Ruiz didn't train for the Joshua rematch. He lost Dominic Brazil before Brazil fought Wilder. I think he went to Virgil Hunter for that fight, so he lost some big money there, because this is a business for him. This is how he supports his family. And then he lost Oscar Valdez, years before the Burchell fight. But can you imagine him being the trainer for that as well? But gaining Virgil Ortiz, he might have gained, like, quote unquote, the crown jewel of boxing potentially at this point. And obviously you don't want to lose fighters, but just staying in his lane and just grinding away and still improving as a trainer might have gained him Virgil Ortiz for how many fights they stayed together.
I really like the situation. Now, granted, Manny Robles might not be the best for defensive techniques and all that, but he definitely deserves a fighter of his own that he can train. And also Virgil deserves his own trainer that'll go anywhere with him and will have time for him. You know what I mean? And I'm also happy for the Canelo team not adding another guy to their stable, because that's just you're spreading yourself so thin. You know what I mean? These guys, they deserve their own trainer like that. So I think it's a good situation.
Writer of the Storm, he has something to say. He says, Robles is good, but I don't think he can get Ortiz to be an elite boxer. What Ortiz lacks is defense and counter-punching efficiently. And then Santiago has something to say about that. He says, I'm sorry, go ahead, Sean.
No, I was going to say that Rider of the Storm, I 100% agree with that. So that's why, from the standpoint of like training and technique and philosophy, I did like Eddie Reynoso, but availability, you can be the greatest in the world, but if you're not available and can't solely dedicate, and we don't know, maybe Robles, Coach Robles has that in his arsenal, so we got to wait and see.
And you know what, two guys? It's really up to Virgil Ortiz's dad to tell Manny Robles, hey, bro, we got to figure out a way to put in some more defensive techniques, man. Let's go out and look for it. What we have to do, you know what I mean? Help us out. You're going to be the guy in the corner, stuff like that. You know, it's really up to the dad because the dad's in there looking at what his son needs and all that. So it's really going to be on his dad to figure that out.
Great point. Great point, no Paul.
Oh, yeah. And Sonteo here says that he saw a post of the fight being in LA at the USC Galen Center. Man, you know what? I would love to see this fight. I would love to see him, like, personally, like, as soon as he starts stepping up, like, you know, his level of competition, like, I might pull the trigger on an Ortiz Jr. fight. Like, maybe, like, once he starts facing, like, I don't know, I wouldn't want to see that particular fight, but, like, you know, top 10 people, like, once he starts facing, like, you know, who knows, like a Keith Thurman or, you know, like a level above Josecito Lopez, like right above there as well. I'm ready to go see this dude, you know what I mean, while he's young and hungry and just ready to bang things out. And dude, yeah, you know, I also want to say that I'm also happy for Manny Robles, man. You know, I think the guy deserves it. You know, the way he ended up just getting dumped by Andrew Ruiz was kind of a shame in my opinion. Like that one, like to me, you know, it left a little bit of a bitter taste in my mouth for Andrew Ruiz. That's when I started disliking him again. At first, like Andrew Ruiz wasn't really on my radar, and then he won, you know, and I was really happy for them. Then he turned into a fat ass, didn't care, you know, and they made it sound like it was his trainer's problem. You know, the guy who took him to the top of the hill, you know, and then he, you know, he sits there and he says stuff like, okay, well, you know, wasn't my idea. It didn't go down the way I wanted it to. But, you know, when you listen to what Manny Robles has to say, he says, hey, man, you know, like this guy wouldn't really answer my calls. You know, I saw this coming, but, you know, he handled it with such maturity. Like, you know, he's an older guy and he's like, hey, man, I got a lot of other things to focus on. I saw it coming. It is what it is. This kind of thing happens in boxing, even though that, you know, I basically was letting this guy sleep on my couch and I was kind of keeping him around in boxing, but that's all right. You know, I got other things going on. So I think this is a great get for Virgil Ortiz. And like you said, Ron, you know, I think Virgil Ortiz Sr. is going to be the main trainer. Like, yeah, I've heard him do the corner work. I'm impressed with what he has to tell his son and their repertoire when they're in the corner. So I'm very happy for the both of them. And, you know, this was just a great moment, you know, and I just want to highlight it. You know, when you were talking about classic fights to go revisit, Gringo, like I didn't watch this one over the holidays, but, you know, the sheer joy that these guys had, even that Manny Robles, the way this guy jumps into the ring afterwards was just like such a cool moment. I mean, those guys are just like sheer freaking elation. You know what I mean? So he's already had quite a high, you know, but he's still busy. You know, he's a trainer and he wants to continue to train. And Virgil Ortiz, like you said, Ron, I think he is the crown jewel potentially, you know, and so we'll see, like, you know, if they work well. And it seems to me like Manny Robles can adapt to, you know, certain coaching scenarios in the corner. So, I mean, it'd be good to have another sharp mind, somebody who can go over there, you know, watch the raps, give, you know, 2 cents advice, you know how everything works around a big event, because I mean, his fights are only going to get bigger. Virgil Ortiz is a rising star. Like I do have some concerns about him only fighting on a platform. Like I'm curious to see like how big the crowds could get. I know for sure that if he was fighting on like network television or Showtime, I think there'd be much more exposure. Like my dad, you know, I kind of use him as a meter for these things. Big boxing fan, but he doesn't even really know who Virgil Ortiz is. But I mean, he could tell you who a lot of these Showtime fighters are. It's just a generation thing. And it's also maybe, you know, it could be a Mexican thing. Like I think he could grow much more if he had more exposure. So I'll be curious to see how big he can get while he's only exclusively fighting on DAZN.
No, that's a great point. And yeah, you actually brought up some feelings I had that I did actually have. And, you know, I'm not Mexican, but I know about loyalty, and I had some resentment towards Andy Ruiz on how he handled the whole thing. And he scapegoated Manny Robles for the second fight. When I had an insider that was telling me that, you know, Manny Robles was like a lot of trainers or anybody that's a mentor or leader had to deal with a lot of BS. He wouldn't come in, or he said he was training at home and he was sending like a 10-second clip of him jogging or doing something that really wasn't him putting in the proper work and, you know, really training. And the way he just dropped Manny Robles was just no respect at all. I don't care who or what you are. That's not a cultural thing. That's a man thing. So I lost all respect for Andy Ruiz after that, straight up. So to have him get this opportunity, I hope he does make the most of it, and I hope they're able to work together. And something else that you said that kind of stood out to me, I was actually talking to some friends as far as, you know, Texas bias, of course, but I was worried about how Virgil Ortiz will do in Cali. How would he do on the East Coast? But that he's fighting in Cali and that he's not fighting a bigger name. How do you guys think that fight's gonna do? Honestly, I haven't heard the card yet, but just being like, because you said, hey, I might go to that, but nah, probably not that one. Is that, and you're hardcore, you know, is that kind of the mindset of a lot of people from Cali or what? Like, as far as Virgil?
Well, I'll tell you, I'm here in Oregon, so I have to travel. But I mean, if I was in SoCal, like I'd be even going to if I was anywhere near Carson, I'd be going to like Donaire fights. I'd be going to all those damn fights. So if I was like just living in anywhere within like maybe like an hour and a half, I would definitely go see Virgil Ortiz, especially because the tickets are going to be cheap. If they're and the energy's good. It's fun to go see a fight live. So it's like I would be going. So I mean, he's got the right crowd around him to make it happen. So I'm also curious.
Awesome.
No, it's probably gonna do good for sure, man, because people want to see him fight. It's gonna do good, especially right there in LA. I mean, Chicano's right. I mean, he. You would probably go Chicano right if it wasn't that far. I wouldn't miss this either if I lived in LA. I'd buy a ticket for sure.
Oh, cool. No.
Yeah, if I was in LA or San Diego, like Chicano, I would go to every single fight they had, basically all the way up from San Diego, all the way up to even like LA Carson area, because there are a lot of good fights that go down, especially like the all action fights that have sort of the like. Imagine going to like I think that Santiago mentioned it in the chat, like the Abner Maris Jesus Cuellar fight. That would have been a great fight to go to, and that was in LA. And then even all the Staples Center fights, Carson fights, I'm sure they have a relatively affordable pricing on tickets too. So those have been good. And then Top Rank had that one. I think Santiago went to it in San Diego not too long ago. From maybe a few months ago. So there are a lot of good fights in California, but especially to see like an up and coming guy like Virgil Ortiz.
No, I love hearing that, man. So that gets me excited. So I'm that's kind of my concern, man. Like, so I just want him to continue and have success. And now he's surrounded by, obviously a team that can dedicate their full attention to him. And I just want him to be a storm and a force in boxing. So I'm excited, and I am anxious to see how the turnout is. And that's going to be on the night of the 19th. So another fight on the 19th. So quinceañera night. So shout out to my brother Hop.
Man, you guys are going to be, in the kitchen fucking on your phones, checking things out, dude.
Don't give that away, brother. That's low key, but yeah, that's pretty much established.
Hey, I get it, dude. I get it.
What's
Rather Storm here, he wants to reiterate that they need to bring in a trainer that can help out Robles with Ortiz's defense. I mean, well, the first best step that they could have done was get away from the Garcia camp. That's the first thing. So any move past that's an upgrade, in my opinion. Nando says McKimson supposedly tough. I've never seen the guy, but and Golden Boy does put on some entertaining cards, and it looks like he might be going to this fight. And Sonteo says they've been wanting to bring Virgil to Los Angeles for a while. When his fight got postponed versus Hooker in March of 2020, it was scheduled to be at the Forum in Inglewood, LA, California. Well, good. And it looks like Nando. See, that's what I'm saying. Like I'd be headed like Ramirez, Pedraza. Like I know people who are living in Northern California that are going to go to that one, and it's in Fresno, so that's like a couple hours drive, or depending on where you're at, give or take. So I mean, hell, like it'd be worth it, man. Those fights are fun. Like I know for sure I'm going to the Canelo fight. If it's like a Charlo one, I'm going to be expensing that. You can all expect to see me there. You know what I mean? Look around, and if you got a problem with me, I'll buy you a beer and we can hang out and be friends. And and Santiago says, dude, you bought 8 tickets to the Mars fight. See, that's what I'm saying. Like, although it's getting harder and harder to rally the troops, but for a Canelo, especially like with Canelo, because it's expensive. But when I went, I was 9 people. I was with 9 people when I went to the Deontay Wilder Tyson Fury one. But that was a good time, and it's like they got more expensive after that. So you couldn't rally the troops the next time. And I only try to go once a year, anyways. But yeah, man. Does anybody have any final thoughts on this before we go on to our next subject?
Yes, oh, sorry, Sean.
I was just gonna say I'm just enjoying the hell out of this show, man. So it's fun. I'm having a great time, man.
Yeah, same here. One point about hiring someone for defense. Real quick, do you guys think of any fighters that have gone to someone that's more defensive and then become more defensive? Like the one that I think of that maybe that they wanted to change up the style after a really big knockout, this in somewhat recent boxing history, would be when Amir Khan left Freddie Roach after he got knocked out by Danny Garcia and went to Virgil Hunter. And I mean, if you guys have any fighters that you can think of, name them. But I think he regressed with Virgil in because he was sort of, I mean, he developed in other ways, but he didn't really develop his defense. He developed a different style. But I thought he was a sitting duck once he went to Virgil because he wasn't using his legs as much, which seemed to be his best defensive, his best asset as his defense, even with Freddie Roach. So what do you guys think?
I was thinking Angulo run PMC, and that happens to be the same trainer right there. So I think one thing with Virgil Hunter is maybe people haven't misconceived. Maybe they think that he teaches them the defense. I don't think he does. I think he just tries to bring out their natural attributes or add to them. Like, because with Angulo, I didn't see him picking up his defense or nothing like that. He just, you know, like you were spot on. Even with Amir Khan, he continued his style, right?
Yeah, yeah, and I think, like I said, I thought he lost his best asset, was his feet, because Virgil had him sitting down, not even really sitting down on punches, but sort of that sort of plodding style that Andre Ward uses, just plodding forward and doing that. And even like when guys go to Floyd Senior and Roger Mayweather, unless you have like a certain level of athleticism and just natural reflexes, there it's going to be probably against your best interest. So I'm just wondering if you could think of any trainers or fighters that would benefit Virgil, because I really I sort of, in a way, you can develop your skills, but you sort of are who you are to an extent. You sort of have to write out your natural talents and your strengths.
I thought I thought his defense improved a little bit when he went to Reynoso, but then now I've kind of seen him start regressing. So I'm not sure if maybe it was kind of like a bad environment all around in the lead up to that fight. The only fight that like comes to mind would be like when Oscar De La Hoya fought Vargas. I used to kind of make fun of that shoulder roll that Oscar De La Hoya was trying to implement, but D-Style made the point that, well, it was kind of deflecting some of those shots. And when De La Hoya was against the ropes, he was actually kind of rolling with the shots a little bit. It looked dorky, and I don't think he really kept it up too much. But I mean, I think he started. I don't know, like it helped out a little bit there, but I also think his defense was pretty good before that. But he would kind of use his, he would kind of catch shots a little bit more with his gloves. And then he would also kind of use his legs a bit more when he had them at a lower weight class. So I think maybe he just kind of had to adapt. That's a great question. I'd have to think about it a little bit more, but I think part of Virgil Ortiz's problem is that he's just like one of those young men. He's like a Vargas, young, headstrong, a bull, wants to go in there and just like bang it out because he can, and he might not be thinking with his brain. Not that he's not thinking, but he just might not be thinking more about like, slipping shots quite yet, but he's going to realize that that's advantageous towards him, and it takes a while to get there, like when you get with somebody at first, you need at least one good camp with them, to kind of like to get that out of the way. And then you start seeing improvements, in my opinion. So, have I seen it anywhere else? I mean, I can't say that I have off the top of my head, but that doesn't mean it's not possible. And I think that Virgil Ortiz has the potential to be a good defensive fighter, but he needs to start prioritizing it and not just going at it. Although I enjoy that, that's what a lot of people enjoy Virgil Ortiz's style, but he takes too many shots. He doesn't seem to mind them yet, but it could be a problem later. And but I do think he has the ability to implement the sweet science, and he's very athletic in my opinion. So like I think that it's just a matter of time before he chooses to improve. You see him going camp to camp. So they'll tell you, they say that there's nobody that trains harder than this dude. You know what I mean? So I'm very curious to see how his style will evolve. Like I don't even think we've gotten close to seeing Virgil Ortiz's peak yet.
Not at all. Something I just want to add real quick, because I know we have 25 more topics to get to, but actually something that Suntail Media came on here, which y'all were one of my favorite episodes that you guys did. Actually, the Ward Kovalev preview, the Rescore, and was brought up is talking about Ward, and you guys went into his how he holds, and he has that athletic, almost MMA grip. And I was thinking, man, when I was like, man, I wish I'd have been on the show to talk about it, but here I am. I could talk about, can you imagine Virgil Ortiz getting the mentorship of Andre Ward and Virgil Hunter and learning that grip? Like that grip could really like kind of change the game. It's not necessarily defensive, but it'll allow him to use the control and his leverage and his his body weight and really kind of control the fight. Cause that's something that's really not taught anymore as far as, boxers. It's more old school crafty type style. But I think by incorporating that, which his athleticism, he could pull it off. And man, the way he can kind of manhandle a lot of his fights, he fights into his opponents. I think that would make him that would change the game a lot and create a lot of problems, especially when he has to go fighting on his back foot. So just my 2 cents on something. And a quick call back. Shout out to Sonteo Mito.
That was a good one. And now that we're talking about some old shit and cleaning house a little bit, Sean, I wanted to ask you, though, we were talking about on another episode that you weren't here. We were talking about times where you really liked the fighter, but you thought he had no chance to win, right? And that was in reference to you saying that Charlo had no chance to beat Canelo. Do you have any other examples of that, my friend, of like a time where you thought, oh shit, I love this guy, but he ain't got a chance?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and say it. And I hope nobody's listening, but I hope everybody is listening. Actually, to be honest, is Triple G too. I didn't think he had a chance to win. I thought he actually we saw the best version of him in the first fight. So when he didn't get the nod the first fight, I didn't see the rematch going in his favor. So I was excited for it. And anything can happen. The whole boxing cliche. People don't talk about it. I know some people, feel like he, it was felt he did better than he did. But I mean, when I looked at the fight going into it, when they announced it, I was like, man, he has no chance. That was my immediate reaction. Like, oh, that's cool, but he has no chance.
Well, there you go, man. All right. Does anybody have any final thoughts before we move on to our next subject? Okay, man. Well, I don't know if you guys have all seen it this morning on Twitter, but dude, Tyson Fury has been popping off. This guy's hungry for a fight. At least that's what he's saying, man. So let's take a little look here. And let's just take a look and see what Fury's been saying. And this is just one clip of like 4. He says he's going to keep talking until somebody answers him.
Again, I do not know the answers to it. I'm ready to fight this weekend. I've been training 3 weeks. How long does a man need to train? Joshua's a coward. Usyk's a pussy. And Dylan White don't want to fight. So if you can prove me wrong, get to fucking fighting. You pair of cowards. You're all cowards. You're all bumdossers. Either fight or do one. You pack of wet lettuces. I'm just going to keep videoing until one of these cowards decide to fight. You're all cowards. Shithouse bums. I don't care who I fight. AJ, Usyk, Dylan White, or any of them. Fight me. I'm the best man that's ever lived. And yous are all coward bumdossers. I'll annihilate the lot of yous and destroy yous. Submit yous. Tap you bitches out. Come and fight.
Damn, there's a lot to unpack there. Run, PMC, dude. What do you think about all this, man? Like, what are your thoughts? Fury's calling for a fight. What do you think about all this?
I mean, it's a sad state of boxing. I think when the heavyweight champion, I mean, Usyk has more belts, but I think we could say right now at least Fury's the best heavyweight. Is can't get a fight. I mean, who knows the politics or the negotiations going on behind the scenes? But if he has to do this to get fights, it's a sad state of boxing where it's like in the past I feel like people would do anything to get these fights, but now at least from what Fury's saying, who knows? He could just be trying to hype up, trying to gain more attention. But if he really has to go through these lengths to get a fight, it's like I said, sad state that guys that claim to be top heavyweights, like I don't think people give Dillian White a lot of credit. I don't think he's a top heavyweight. I don't think he's anywhere near a top heavyweight. Like maybe because the heavyweight division lacks depth, but in being compared to yesteryear's boxers, I don't think so. But I mean, hopefully he can get a fight. Hopefully it could be the Usyk fight, just so we can get undisputed out of the way and just get it over with. Just so we have one champion, and then we can move forward. Like I don't want to see White, or we can have AJ Fury. Who cares? Or AJ Usyk. I don't really care. I just want to see the quote unquote top guys go at it. And Wilder sort of seems like he's on the outside looking in, and also because he's probably just recovering. You're not going to throw him in a big fight just yet, but make the Fury fight with someone. Just don't leave him a champion on the outside looking in.
No, Paul, what do you think, brother?
I don't know. Maybe he drinks some espresso in the morning or something, man. Because it's how do you know who's telling the truth nowadays, man? I mean, he's got a list of dudes that he's talking about he wants to fight, but he's got problems with each one's negotiating. So, if you really want to fight anybody, just fight any bum, man, and stay busy. Fight a couple low-level guys or guys that, guys on the ranking list. Fight anybody, you know what I mean? Stay busy. If that's, and, so it like I said, it's just, who do we believe, man? I mean, as far as the Dillian White thing, I mean, I don't know what's going on with that, but if you really want to, if that's one of the guys that you really want to fight, okay, give him 5% more and let's make the fight happen. How hard is that? Another 5%. You know what I mean? I guess they had ruled it 25% split. I'm sure they'll accept it if you give them 5% more. If you want the fight that bad, if you want to stay busy that bad, then fight Dillian White. I mean, it's an easy fight for him to win. There's a list of dudes. And as far as him saying that Usyk's a pussy, come on, we all know he isn't. No guy moves from cruiserweight to heavyweight and is scared to fight. You know what I mean? I'm pretty sure Usyk wants that fight too, but he's tied up. We all know basically what's going on. I mean, we all know that these guys, Like, I think Usyk does want to fight him. It's just he's tied up with that AJ, and they're rumoring which is probably the next subject you got, huh? As far as the situation there that Gringo told us about.
Well, yeah, man,
rumors.
we're covering all of it, man. Anything that you want to discuss as far as
Yeah.
Tyson, because Tyson's
brother.
generally addressing all these rumors. Go ahead, Sean.
No, I was, no pause on fire, man. Letting him cook, man. I love it. I think that is where we're at, and yeah, man, Usyk's not a pussy or anything like that. I mean, he's fucking unified champ. He came up from cruiser and proved everybody wrong. I mean, he's the complete opposite. There's a lot of talking right now, and I think maybe he did have an espresso, hopefully just that. But he was clearly caffeinated and fired up, and his house is really far from his garage. Damn, that's a long walk. So, he has a lot going on, but unfortunately it's not fights. And Paul said something very interesting. A lot of people realize that, that trilogy, that was a, amazing fight. A lot of things that went into it emotionally, physically, obviously. I mean, shit, he got knocked down. Just a lot of war of attrition. Nobody's going to give him shit for a stay busy fight. Will we like him to fight Dillian White? Absolutely. But if they can't get past the paperwork, it is a business, her business, then, fight somebody. I think maybe because he knows the game, he's talking that shit because he knows nothing's going to come from it. And that's kind of where he's at with that. And, I don't think we want to look any more past that. The thing I am excited about, which was also mentioned, Paul, as far as, the step aside money, that I think there's some, even though I know, which is funny that AJ came out and on his social media, he said, I haven't interviewed with nobody, but then he came back and deleted about the alleged $15 million to step aside so that Fury and Usyk could actually fight, which is the thumbnail of this awesome video you guys are checking out. Thank you so much for the support. But that's what I think. I think that there's some smoke there. He's frustrated. He's just mouthing off. And I think the things will eventually clear themselves up and a fight will emerge. But, him calling people out when he knows they're kind of aligned. The Dillian White thing, I'm not 100% clear on why that isn't going to happen. But at the same time, as far as Usyk and AJ, we'll see. Hopefully, even though AJ said it wasn't true, I'll go ahead and say for myself, I would like for AJ to step aside. And for AJ in his camp, that's the smart move to make, honestly. Step aside, fight the winner. Then we get undisputed out of nowhere. Thank you very much. Sign me up for that. And then, you got yourself a big-time heavyweight fighter can finally get undisputed, even though I know, ideally, Eddie Hearn wants that big UK matchup. But technically, you can still have it. You win either way. Either you're going to get the big UK matchup or you're going to get the rematch with Usyk. And Usyk will have all the belts. So to me, it's a power move that benefits Eddie Hearn and AJ. So I don't know why you need $15 million. Shit, that's the move to make to me. And then also more time to figure out, because remember, he went on his dating parade too, his speed dating. And he was trying to figure out who he wanted to have, work in his corner or help him out. So, obviously that's kind of shown to be show now. But if he's going to have more time to allow to deliberate and kind of figure something out. And then he'll get another opportunity to do what? To scout, to watch Usyk, to watch Tyson Fury, and then, sit back and get paid to sit back. So that's the move to make. So I don't know why he felt the need to put that information out there in the universe and say that's not true. When I think, like they say, when there's smoke, there's fire. And I think there's some fire to this. And I hope that's the case because to me, it's just logical.
Dude, to me too, it's logical. I think that Joshua, I think he would benefit from just letting things develop, man. If he wants to take that step aside money, it's just like you said, dude. Like, I think it would be beneficial for him, and he's going to be one of those next guys to see. But I think right now, like, regardless of whether he's undisputed or not, I've always maintained that Tyson Fury is the heavyweight champion, in my opinion. But I do want to see Usyk fight him because, there's always a next guy to see, like I say. But I do think that Usyk is that next guy to see. He's earned it, you know what I mean? So it's just a way of Fury solidifying that he is the man. And I think this could be a super fight. Like this fight would really excite me. Like part of me thinks that Usyk could win this fight. I might even consider it to be a 50-50 fight just based on Fury's fighting style. And I have this theory that one day he might get old overnight based on how he does things. Like in that last Wilder fight, like, he wasn't moving around like he used to as much. He kind of put himself on the line, took Wilder's best shots, fought on the inside, and he can do a whole lot of things great in my opinion. But I think this agile, 6'9" dude, like he might not be able to do that anymore so much. And, he's he's pretty heavy, but he's sitting there saying he's ready for a fight. But I saw him and I forget who the co guy is that who's that heavyweight that he trains with. I forget his name.
Parker.
What's that?
Joseph Parker.
Joseph Parker. Thank you.
His
Sean.
little brother.
Yeah, dude. I saw them like doing like these body shot sparring, and hell, Fury's got like the spare tires. He says he's ready for a fight, and I kind of believe him in a way where he says, "Hey, I don't need all these long training camps. Like I know my body. Like I'm ready for a fight right now." And it's like he might feel that way. People don't always need 8 weeks. Maybe a few weeks is good. Mayweather used to say, "Give me 6 weeks and I'll beat him." Right. So I mean, people are different. So I think that Fury is ready to go. He's probably hungry. He probably wants to get it out of his system. But I've also seen Fury have the ability to kind of just be able to take breaks, have fights not happen, and still be ready to go for the main fight. So even though he's ready to go, as long as he could stay motivated, you know what I mean? And it seems like he's in a really good place with his family, with his trainer. It seems like all the dynamics are there for him to kind of just be able to keep this going for a bit. And then we could see Usyk, versus Fury. That'd be great. I really think Joshua will be that next in line. Nobody really cares about what Dillian White has to say. If that's the stay busy fight, that'd be great. But I mean, I think only UK fans are like really into the idea of that fight because, there's just been so much talk of Dillian White.
Right.
And I think he's just, a nice mid-level guy. I don't think he needs to get in front of the line for any reason. Like if we can see better fights, that's what I want to see next.
No, go ahead, no Paul.
I wanted to say that we all know that how Tyson Fury is. He's up and down with his emotions. One minute he's thinking one thing, the next minute he doesn't mind saying the complete opposite. And as in the comment section, Nando says that he's just basically capping, and also Ryder in the Storm says that it's this coming from a guy that didn't fight in 24 months. So there's that. Basically, Fury's been known to say a couple things that didn't materialize. I mean, he'll probably tell everybody it's not about the money, but then, then he's over there, not fighting people because because the money's not right. So, he tends to do the complete opposite of what he says sometimes.
Yeah, the Gypsy King's a king of contradiction. That's for sure. One thing I wanted to kind of get your thoughts on for sure, bro, is like one thing that I've heard other content creators say, and I want your thoughts on this. Do you think there's anything towards Fury not wanting to fight Usyk? Not saying scared. None of these guys, I mean, they're fighters, they're men. He's the king of men, like he says. But do you think there's like a preference level, not even just taking money out of the picture, just as far as the men that he feels he could beat or not beat or have more issues with? I take to a quote that I had when I had the honor and privilege of interviewing, Big Daddy Bo. He said, as a fighter, you understand the guys that you can beat, the guys that may give you some problems, and the guys you should avoid, right? All fighters, whether they tell you that or not, that's how all real fighters feel. Do you think that maybe he has some of that, some self-doubt maybe he doesn't have with the other guys when it comes to Usyk? Because when he had the interview, I believe on the last the Top Rank telecast I saw, and he was on there with his, loud code and singing. I believe it was when, it was Bob Arum's birthday. And they were asking about Usyk, and he didn't want to know part of that. When usually he's, quick to call the people out and, say, I want this, I want that. But for whatever reason, he's not interested in even addressing that conversation. Is there anything to that, or I'm making something out of nothing? What's your thoughts on that?
I think, let me just jump in front of the line. I think, there is something towards that. I think that Tyson Fury can definitely beat Usyk, but I believe that his game plan would basically be the same one that Klitschko had versus Povetkin. You know what I mean? So it's going to be kind of a stinker, and maybe he wants to avoid all that. I think he's going to be leaning on him, clinching him, that type of stuff.
Great point.
Go ahead, Ron. What do you think about all this, man?
I mean, it's so hard to tell. Like are we taking Fury seriously, or are we not taking Fury seriously this day? And I mean, I do agree with what Riddick Bowe did say, though. Like, I don't because I know people say that, oh, fighters aren't scared, that's what they do. I don't necessarily always believe that either, but I do believe that fighters know their capabilities and know what their weaknesses are. That's how they've been around, stuck in the game so long. So maybe Usyk Fury doesn't feel comfortable with Usyk's style. I would still favor Fury in the fight, but it would definitely be a good fight. And that's why we want to see the fights. But maybe Fury doesn't like what Usyk can do because Usyk being able to have like good footwork and move around like Fury, maybe just because they both have good footwork, he's afraid that he sees what he can do to guys, and he's afraid Usyk might be able to do that to him being smaller. And I think Fury has good hand speed, but he doesn't. I don't know if he has the same timing as Usyk does. So maybe he is avoiding him for that reason, or maybe not, or maybe he's just being Fury and just saying whatever he wants to on the given day. So or it could be a combination of everything. So who knows?
Awesome.
Yeah, I think it could be a combination of everything, but I think that there's a lot of confidence in the Fury camp. Shout out to Young Billy Boxing, who has Joseph Heron at War Week, and I remember Joseph Heron referencing what Sugar Hill Stewart had to say about this, and he says he thinks Fury can reign for the next 4 to 5 years, and I believe he's confident in that. And I think him and Fury, I think they're a solid team, and I think that they maybe feel that they can run the tables. Maybe Fury doesn't believe that as much. He might not think that he has as much as he used to have as far as like pure energy goes, and his style might have to adapt. So, I mean, I think that he would want to take Usyk now. If he's going to take him now. It's for all the marbles. It's for undisputed. And then you would leave no stone unturned except for possibly Joshua. I mean, that would be a big fight, but in the grand scheme of things, Joshua's already lost twice. Like, it'd be a high profile fight, but it's not like people would be saying afterwards, oh, he ducked Joshua. Like, nah, Joshua ended up being not the guy necessarily. He's a guy who could contend, former champion, could be a champion again, but he's not like the guy to see. But, eventually, and Fury's been heavyweight, just like most heavyweights, his whole career. So if you're already like 32, 33, the last thing that you can do now is go undisputed. Like, that's the thing to do next. Otherwise you're just kind of spinning your wheels. He doesn't seem to like need the money, or it doesn't seem to be this top priority, in my opinion, for him. Like, it just doesn't seem like he's all about that, and I think he could be quite comfortable living very simply. I remember one time he said, hey, I could be just as happy eating like this, $500 meal as, some kind of sandwich for like $5. It's about how you feel, and I believe him. His he's living in some like, tricked out, like, gypsy, post-military converted trailer thing, living the no band lifestyle because he knows what's coming. You know what I mean? Is what he says, talking about conspiracies. But hell, I think they're a simple people, so it's like, I mean, I think I think he wants that fight. I think he's ready to go. I think he's ready to go soon. And man, it would just be a great pickup for boxing if we got this fight. I mean, there are a couple of faces of boxing, Canelo being one of them, but I think Fury has established himself as one of those main guys. Like, it's a big fight feel now when Fury comes out, especially if it's a good opponent. If he's fighting a named opponent, like, that's something that we can all look forward to. Like, I can't tell you how many segments I had to sit through of like, oh, will Fury Joshua happen? It's like, damn, so much talk. I mean, this guy, he attracts attention. You know what I'm saying? So like, I'll be very happy if I see Fury pop off with Usyk. Very, very happy.
I love hearing that. And this other thing I want to throw out there is like, for me in boxing, people always like, was that a good year? Was that a good year for boxing? You got to look at something to kind of measure, like, what the fight of the year was, a knockout of the year. To me, with all this chaos we have, the way you can kind of have some uniformity is to kind of consolidate that. And that would be undisputed. So measure of success for me is the more undisputed champions we have, the less people that have a bunch of belts that we can't keep track of, is the better for boxing to have one true champion. And so if we can have an undisputed fight, what I didn't expect, and AJ, if you can make that happen, if you're listening, brother, and I know you are because you're a big fan of the show, to hear us talk, please, whatever they need to do for that, and it's going to wind up making you more money, man. So please, man, step aside. Thank you.
Well, that's right. Does anybody have any final thoughts before we get to our controversial rescore segment?
I just wanted to say something real quick. As far as AJ, I mean, I think he has a thing where he wants us all to believe that he's willing to take risky fights and stuff like that. But, we all know that that's true. I mean, he's been in some risky situations, even with the rematch with Andy Reeves, that virtually looked unwinnable for him. He had to do a lot of things to win that fight, So we know that he's willing to fight anybody, and that's a plus to him because in the position that he's always been, he's a big time draw in the sport. So, he's probably always going to be the A side to anybody that he fights. And, as far as him wanting to think that he's a warrior and all that, we already know he is. So there's no harm in him stepping aside on this one. It'd actually be dumb if he doesn't take the rumored 15 million and just step out of the way, because he's always going to be a high commodity, and we'll always have respect for him. So it'd probably be better for him to step aside. He probably has better chances, improve his skill and get back in the ball game. You know what I mean?
Great point.
Oh yeah, and you know what? I think that an announcement for a fight could be imminent with Tyson Fury. Hopefully, we'll see something develop within the next couple of weeks, and they could get it going very quickly. There might be some big fight announcements coming up. I mean, there's still a lot of fighters who don't have anything on the books, and I think as soon as Fury gets that fight, as soon as Canelo gets that fight, everything else is going to play itself out, and we're going to have a nice little schedule. And the lead up into the Cinco de Mayo weekend is actually starting to look not that bad. When I'm hearing about some of these fights that might happen before, like in March, April, it's pretty impressive. So I mean, we could have some good boxing to look forward to this whole year. I thought it was going to be maybe a soft year, but I think things are shaping up real nicely here.
Awesome, brother. Love to hear it. Great stuff. Great points. And man, let's step aside, please.
Oh yeah. We'll see what happens, and we'll be sure to keep you all updated, just like every other channel that you choose to listen to. But hey, man, it's time to get into our controversial rescore segment. I want to apologize to the panelists. Like, I've been trying to upload my slides for this, and for some reason, it's just not working while I'm live on the StreamYard. But we do have Run PMC who can break it down like no other and paint that picture. So we went back and we revisited Sergio Martinez versus Kermit Cintron. People say it was one of the most controversial fights that they've ever seen. So, Sean, tell us about the time, man. What was going on then? Run PMC. Please tell us what was going on. Sorry, man. The one and only Run PMC, everybody.
All right. So this fight took place February 14th, 2009 in Sunrise, Florida. So Valentine's Day fight. And this really was a fight between a then quote unquote experienced up and comer being Sergio Montavia Martinez versus a former world champion Kermit Cintron, who is looking to keep coming back in his career and see if he has one last run within his career. And this is a topical fight as well, because as you saw on the other HCP shows yesterday, with that 13 years ago, Antonio Margarito lost to Shane Mosley. And then this fight took place almost 13 years ago, and was a month before, a little bit after that fight. So, and Antonio Margarito was very, very connected in both of these guys' careers. Being Sergio Martinez, when he first came and tried to get in the limelight, Sergio Martinez first loss was against Antonio Margarito, and that being a relatively young Sergio Martinez in his boxing career. Whereas Kermit Cintron's career, as I think, in my opinion, as a prominent fighter, was really derailed twice by Antonio Margarito, losing brutally by stoppage in both fights. And really, at least from what I saw, Kermit Cintron, after that first Margarito fight, wasn't the same fighter for the rest of his career. I mean, he had some good wins. He did take, after this fight, even he did take Alfredo Angulo's undefeated record, but I really don't think that Kermit Cintron was the same after those Margarito fights. So it's I don't know if it would be somewhat liberating, but because we know what really went down with the whole Margarito rap scandal. Yes, it was illegal, but it wasn't what it was. There weren't bricks. Wasn't concrete, as we covered on other HCP shows. So just having that Margarito tied into both their careers, and seeing where both of these fighters went after this fight is definitely interesting. Sergio Martinez going on a run from after this fight, fighting Paul Williams, Kelly Pavick, Paul Williams, Sergey Zinzirek, Darren Barker, Matthew Macklin, Chavez Jr., Martin Murray, and then even though he's still boxing, this was effectively his last fight, was Miguel Cotto. That's quite a run for a middleweight. And then Kermit Cintron, like I said, going and beating Angulo, taking his undefeated record, but not really doing much for the rest of his boxing career. But yeah, so this fight was also it was on HBO Boxing After Dark. The promoters of this fight, Lou DiBella, and then Don King and Gary Shaw. So Gary Shaw and Don King, Gary Shaw out of the boxing business. I think he is a head of the NABF. I'm not sure which body he's the head of, but then Don King still, he has a fight coming up, so still topical in that sense. And then Gabby Sarmiento still in the corner of Sergio Martinez for this fight. He hadn't been I guess, removed from the United States yet, and Pablo hadn't stepped in yet, and then Ronnie Shields actually in the corner for Kermit Cintron. Kermit Cintron seemed to bounce from trainer to trainer. He spent a little bit of time with Kronk, but Ronnie Shields in the corner for this fight. And then this was for Sergio Martinez's WBC interim belt, and which is the same belt that um, excuse me, this was the same belt that Manny Pacquiao ended up winning when he fought Antonio Margarito, and then also before that, unfortunately this was the belt that was when once Sergio Martinez was elevated to the 154 champion. Vernon Forrest was actually stripped for this title a month before he was tragically murdered in Atlanta, Georgia. So there is some significance for the belt that was eventually Martinez was elevated after this fight. And then just some other boxers that were prominent at this time in the division. The WBA champion was Daniel Santos, who, with I guess famous for his fights with Antonio Margarito. Vernon Forrest, like I said, at the time was the WBC champion. Corey Spinks, IBF champion, and then WBO champion Sergey Zinzirek was the other champion. So that's just some context to put around this fight. And then, but how did you guys have this one scored?
Man, that was a great breakdown. Thank you so much for PMC. Sean, let's start with you, man. What'd you think about this fight? How'd you have it scored, brother?
All right. So first of all, I'm glad we got a chance to go back and revisit this one. We've had some stinkers. I don't know if anybody knows that, but we had to cleanse some palates, and this was also another palate cleanser, man. They had some good action back and forth. I did favor Sergio Martinez. I will say going into it, I was biased, so I was a Sergio Martinez fan, and this definitely showed him more in his prime. The timing that he has, you know, how he does the hesitation with the feints, man, putting the hands down, talking shit when he's doing his back foot. I mean, he's just doing his thing, man. So I had it 8-4. I gave Cintron, I gave him 2, 3, 9, and 10. Yeah. So 2, 3, 9, and 10. And for those, it was like when the inside of the exchanges, he did, you know, he was having a real problem as far as like with the counter, like the countering of Sergio Martinez was awesome. Also, as far as like the placement of his shots, he was landing really clean. Hell, I mean, we'll go ahead and say it right now, not to steal anybody's thunder, in case you didn't know that there was some controversy in this fight. Because that was a knockout, right? I mean, that's how I saw it. It was a knockout in 7, but for whatever reason, the referee didn't call it, and the fight continued. So you had 7 was a controversial, but it just got scored a knockdown, but it should have been a knockout because I thought the fight was over too, which kind of threw and kind of swung things off. And then, credit to Cintron, he came back and, was able to kind of establish himself and get back. And he was fighting very much a desperate man at that point. They definitely had some good exchanges, and, he was definitely able to, but establish and use his power. But that's the thing that was respectful that I really liked as far as Sergio Martinez, because he's able to negate with the angles he had, that he never got the full brunt of Cintron, because he was dangerous as far as with that right hand lead. Cintron was. And then at the end, they had another controversial thing that was weird as shit. Like they had the hit behind the head that got scored, but it was more like a graze. But the referee called that he put a point deduction, which led to the draw, which was crazy and just a really just shocking overall event. In fact, Ring Magazine actually called it, in the last 10 years, the referee had one of the worst performances in the last 10 years of refereeing in boxing. And that's saying something, right? So, and that was the referee, Frank Centaur Jr., right, from Florida. And so the combination of him not counting that, the shot, as far as like when it was the knockdown, he didn't count that as being a knockout. Cintron was on his knees, apparently waving. The bout was sounded the bell. Cintron claimed that it was a headbutt, and he put him down. And Cintron shook his head and told wanting the fight, and he didn't see and put his hands down. So he missed that clearly. And then of course he did a call at the end where he called a point deduction against Sergio Martinez, which seemed to be just kind of out of nowhere and seemed like an absurd deduction that seemed really, lack of a better word, shady. So that's how I had it, 8-4. And yes, I even though I know the gringo meter, but this one, because of the 12th round deduction, and I thought it was a knockout when they actually just called it a knockdown.
All right, so you do classify it as a robbery then. Okay, score 1 for a robbery. We have it marked down. Run PMC, man. What'd you think about this fight?
It was definitely entertaining. I mean, I had it 118, 108 for Sergio Martinez. So definitely wider than other people. But I did have for my close rounds, I did have the first 3 being close rounds. So I did give those all to Martinez, obviously. So I could very easily see this being an 8-4 contest. Very easily. I just favored Martinez's style in that fight and in the first 3 rounds. That's why I gave him to him. But after that, I mean, I think he just took control. And I think around those like 4 through 6 is sort of when even in Kermit Cintron's both his losses against Margarito, that's sort of when he fades really fast, is in that 4th round. And then I think Margarito stopped him. Maybe it was in the 4th and the 6th, I think, respectively, in those fights. So he sort of fades in that, and that's when Martinez was taking over. He dropped him. Martinez took over, I think, in the 4th round, and then he dropped him and should have stopped him in the 7th. So it's right around the sweet spot of when Cintron sort of fades. But Martinez, yeah, it was. I think this was the start of probably Martinez's prime of when he was being able to style on guys, use his feet, have his hands down, throw that jab, and then he looked good to me. You could see how small he was though, compared to later in his career. He definitely didn't seem as mature as he was later in his career at 160. But he looked good to me, and I think I would say this fight, even though it was in a different decade, this fight, along with the Joseph Ebeko Abner Mares one, has to be probably some of the worst refereeing I've seen. That fight, just from Russell Mora, just I don't know how many low blows. It had to be close to 20 low blows letting him go in that Ebeko fight. And then this one, uh, I don't know how you even. I see how he didn't see that was a knockdown just from where he was, or how was a knockout. I mean, I guess if you were to really just justify it for the ref, but it shouldn't have been. It should have been a clear stoppage. I don't know how you get away with that. And anyways, and then the point deduction in the 12th, it almost was like, D-Style always talks about like front loading scorecards. This was like backloading a scorecard for the other fighter, Cintron. So I I I think Sergio Martinez should have had a TKO victory, if not knockout victory, in the 7th. And I don't know. I mean, the judges having one judge give it 116, 110, Sergio Martinez, and then a draw 113, 113. I don't even know how you come near 113, 113. Even if you were to deduct another point for Sergio Martinez and not give him credit for a knockdown in the 7th, I still think it's a clear victory. But yeah, so I would say this is definitely a robbery. 118, 108 for me.
Oh, man, we might be looking at a clean sweep here. Run PMC has it as a robbery. All right. Nopal, what did you think about this fight, man?
Um, I really enjoyed it, and first of all, I had the opposite 3 rounds. I actually had him for Cintron. I think that's the only time he actually did good is the first 3 rounds. So I gave him those rounds. Round 3, I think Martinez was already warming up, and he had some good in and out movement, but I think he was getting jabbed a lot. So, like I said, I gave that to Cintron, and then the rest of the fight, I just gave it to Sergio Martinez because by this time he had switched to his, hands down, which meant he was comfortably moving in and out. Cintron did manage to sneak some punches throughout the fight, but as we also saw around 7, what a punch that was, man, that put Cintron down. I mean, it like everybody said, I mean, he actually thought he had gotten headbutt, and I believe that he probably did believe that, but it was just such an awkward angle, and the way Martinez managed to get that in. And I think the reason why the ref decided to change his mind is because even though Cintron thought he had gotten head butted, he still managed to get up before the 10 count. So I guess that, and with all this protesting, I guess that made the referee decide, hey, I might as well let him get back in the fight. So the fight continued, and I did notice that in the clinches, Martinez had managed to hit Cintron a couple times behind the head, and I think he was already warned about that. So even though in the 12th round that might not have been legit behind the neck punch, maybe it was just weird position of Cintron. I think he just made that call to deduct a point, and that kind of sucks. I figure, the way I scored it, even with that, there's no way it was close to a draw. So I also classify it a robbery. As I said, I had it 9 rounds of 3. There was the knockdown, and then it evened out, I guess, with the point deductions. But even then, I still classify it as a robbery.
All right. Well, it looks like we're headed towards a clean sweep. I had the fight 115, 111 for Sergio Martinez. I gave Martinez rounds 1, 3, 5, 7, 8, 9, 11, and 12. And then, of course, he had a point deducted, and then, so, I mean, it was kind of I could see why they definitely marked this one as like a controversial fight, in my opinion. Like, I thought it was a pretty good fight, as far as like the snoozers that we've had to go back and rewatch. This one was a bit better, and like I was mentioning last week, I wanted to see how I felt about Sergio Martinez using that type of defense, whether I would still give him as much credit, because now I find it much more annoying when people aren't in the pocket. But I felt like Martinez was doing enough like to offset when he would kind of get out of range. But he was kind of doing what's like known as that squared circle. He did a lot of circling very well. Also would be at long range, kind of stick his head out. And he was starting to get that rhythm down really well against Kermit Cintron. Another thing I noticed was that like one of the adjustments that Cintron made was just kind of mirroring that, like that hands down style. And that took a little bit of adjustment from Martinez, because like, oh, okay, well, I mean, it's kind of a different look, and I thought Martinez did do some good work. I mean, I did think that that 7th round was a bit bizarre. Like, I've never seen anything like that. We might not see anything like that again. Like, I've never seen like a ref kind of change his mind on something, although it was a punch, and I guess technically he did get up in time, although, they didn't really, I don't know if they showed it, but it was kind of controversial whether he got up right at 10, but you shouldn't have been complaining about the headbutt. Who knows? It might have been controversial the other way if they just kind of let that fight settle the way it did. History might have forgotten it, right? But I mean, I'm kind of glad that they did go and finish off the rounds. But I think Martinez took his foot off the pedal a little bit too much, in my opinion. Like, once he started getting the rhythm and it started being a paint job, once he started getting Cintron bloody, like, I felt like he was kind of taking too many breaks in between. Also, I felt like he was admiring his work a little bit too much going in there. And so I did have some swing rounds because of that. Like, I thought that you could conceivably give you could conceivably give Cintron the first round as well as the 9th round. I mean, and if you do that on my card, if you give him every benefit of the doubt, it could have been a draw if you give him every benefit of the doubt. But I'm actually happy that you guys are saying that it's a robbery, because I wanted to call it a robbery, but I thought, well, nah, there was just times where I felt like Cintron wasn't doing that bad. Like, he was sitting there slugging it out. He was holding his real estate, and he was punching back, but Martinez, he definitely won the fight, in my opinion. I had Martinez winning this fight. He comes in at such a strange angle. I mean, there's only so many ways that you can come in, but he kind of comes in at this very weird angle, and he punches at a weird angle too. So his rhythm is very different and unique. So I appreciated watching his overall style, something that's still pretty unique. Like, I'd be curious to see like how he would do with like modern day 154 pounders, 160 pounders. Like, there's nobody like him really. I would favor him to beat a lot of these dudes, probably all of them if I thought about it, but I have to think about it a little bit more. But Sergio Martinez, it was a great pleasure to go back and watch him. And so it wasn't exactly a clean sweep, but I'm glad that El Chile can classify this one as a robbery, so that'll be good. And now we can open it up a little bit and talk a little bit more about this fight. If anybody has any additional thoughts about this fight, please let me know.
Yeah, I have with Cintron, I mean, you try to give every boxer the benefit of the doubt, at least I do, when it comes to like thinking they're head-butted, punches behind the head, or things that are quote unquote like illegal tactics. But I think it was telling that after this fight, when Cintron fought Williams, Cintron got quote unquote thrown out of the ring, and he got taken out on a stretcher. Williams got the victory, but it looked like, in my opinion, Cintron was trying to get a way out of there. Luckily, I think it was past the 4th round, so it would be considered a fight. But that's just my opinion. It just seems, when I see these like type of patterns, like with Victor Ortiz, like quitting and like doing little things that you could sort of you try to give them benefit of doubt, but when you see repeat offenders, it's hard to, in my opinion.
I agree, man. It doesn't take long to start building a reputation. Just kind of like, I think you and I were talking about Bernard Hopkins kind of doing that, looking for ways to get out of fights, or saying the wrong thing. And a guy that experience knows when he's saying the thing that'll stop a fight. You know what I mean? And so I kind of felt that way with Kermit Cintron. And also like Yeah, no, it was pretty interesting. But, as far as like this fight in particular, Martinez versus Cintron, I have to say that the 154-pound run for Martinez is very impressive, but I think his 160-pound run, although it's more brief, is better. Like, he's still getting better, even though he's a bit older. Like he's over 30 in this fight. He's not a young man anymore, but he got to the sport late, and he was continuing to improve, in my opinion, with every fight. And he was fighting some big guys, just dancing circles around them, and also putting people down. Like he had power, one punch knockout type power. And he was running the tables for a while. So I'm glad we have a chance to actually just go back and appreciate Sergio Martinez and his skill set. Nopal, you were talking a little bit about the timing of everything with Triple G coming on and his run at 154 and 160.
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to ask you guys, with all that, Martinez was doing, how do you still manage to duck Triple G, man? You guys got any input on that?
Good one. Well, all I can say is that, dude, I was there. I was paying attention to boxing at the time, and it's hard to classify him. It's not like he was gonna be the guy to see, but he was never like, okay, you need to face him next. If not, you're ducking. Like he was coming on. He was starting to get that great resume, just starting to build it with actual names. So it's not like he was like the next guy to see. Martinez was the man. He was the lineal champ. If you didn't like this fight, I was going to go back and recommend, as far as palate cleansers, I say go back and watch Kelly Pavlik versus Sergio Martinez. That's one hell of a fight. And then I also want to make a little bit of a retraction. I called that fight a clinic last week, and actually that fight has a lot of good back and forth before Sergio Martinez kind of gets that rhythm down, and then the paint job starts, right? But before that, it's a damn good fight. Sergio Martinez was the man. He was the lineal champ who'd earned it the hard way from the legitimate lineal champion from a great lineage, and he held it proudly, and then he went on in Shield, and when he lost to Cotto, he really didn't say much about it, but you could tell he was just not the same fighter. And I'm glad that Cotto gave him the respect. I don't know if you guys remember their face-off between Martinez and Cotto, but Martinez was pissed off that he wasn't getting A-side billing. He's like, this isn't how you treat a champion, and then Cotto's like, but like Martinez was able to do the ring. I believe he did the ring walk second, and then he got announced second as the champ. So Cotto ultimately decided to pay him that respect, and then Martinez did the favors by just taking the loss, and then just quietly going away saying, hey, he beat me straight up. And then I think years and years later, he said, yeah, my legs were jacked up. But that was obvious for anybody to see.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that, Chicano, thanks for all that. I think that timeline wise is a good way to look at the ducking theory. You know what I mean? Because at one point, Tom Loeffler started to say that, well, look at Martinez. He never gave us a chance, that type of thing. But if you go back to the timeline, which we've used this before in the past, right, Chicano, with going back on timelines with different boxers saying that other guys are ducking them. If you follow the timeline, there's no way you could even say that that Martinez ducked Triple G, because, when Martinez was at 154 and he was elevated because of Vernon's injury and then, his tragic death afterwards, rest in peace. Triple G, at that time in 2009, it was like May, Triple G was still barely fighting for the vacant WBO Intercontinental belt, which, if you're like a hardcore fan, that type of belt is nothing to us, really. And then if you fast forward it a little bit to when Martinez in the next year, in April, decides to just move up to 160 to face Kelly Pavlik for the WBC, WBO, and lineal and the ring belt. When Martinez is going for that, Triple G's barely going for fighting Milton Nunes for the WBA interim belt, which those type of belts, again, I'm going to remind you guys, we don't respect those type of belts. And, the WBO decides to strip Martinez because Martinez simultaneously during those 2 weeks, he still held the 154 title for the WBC. So they wanted him to make up his mind. And Martinez is probably looking at it like, well, I don't make enough to pay all these sanctioning fees anyways, to have to give away all my money. So he was just like, we'll see what they decide. So they decided to strip him off the WBO 160. Because, again, I don't think he was making enough money to pay all the sanctioning fees. So at this time, he was still the WBC lineal ring, official champ. And then you fast forward a little bit more to the Chavez Jr. fight, which was in 2012. We all know that, that was probably his last great fight, as far as Martinez. He's had already aged, and, he managed to win almost every round, but he did get kind of hurt in the last round. And, what was Triple G doing around this time? This is one of Triple G's good fights that people always remind us of. It was a pretty good fight. Greg Proska, he was fighting barely for the regular belt, which again, we don't really take the belt serious, and he was fighting for the IBO, which a lot of people make fun of that belt. And then you fast forward this now to the Cotto fight. Triple G was barely that, which was basically Martinez's way of passing the torch over to anybody. You know what I mean? Cashing out, because basically he had no more legs. You know what I mean? He was trying to get Cotto to let him use his brace, his leg brace. Think it was his knee brace, and that's why he had those big old shorts. You know what I'm saying? Which Cotto didn't let it. He had to just use a regular brace, but because Cotto didn't allow that, I guess, which was another thing he was mad about. But what was Triple G doing around that time? I mean, he was barely. 3 months later after that fight, Triple G's barely taking the opportunity of fighting Daniel Gill to be elevated to the WBA Super. So now he was an official champ. But by this time, Martinez had already retired. So as far as timeline wise, if you look at it, in my opinion, there's no way that anybody could ever say that he ducked Triple G, because even if you fast forward it to Triple G's career right now, he's been given multiple vacant belt opportunities. Times when we thought he was going to fight certain fighters, he went ahead and found a way not to fight them. Didn't really take certain guys seriously. Triple G in Martinez's position, would he have fought him? Given the same circumstance, I think that's an obvious no. So, did he duck? Triple G? Did Martinez duck Triple G? In my opinion, hell no. They were never in the same. You know what I mean? They were always on there was no. I don't even think that fight was ever possible. If you ask.
Right.
Damn, that was some good stuff. Sorry, go ahead, Ren.
No, I was gonna say I totally agree. They weren't in the same era. They weren't even contemporaries. They're contemporaries in the sense of both of them were in a weight class at the same time, but as they're on in their careers, that was effectively the Cotto fight was effectively Martinez's last fight. I know he's still fighting now, but effectively that was his last fight. But I pulled up the box rec just to be sure. Miguel Cotto fought Sergio Martinez on 2014, June 7th, 2014, and then Triple G fought Daniel Gill a little over a month later on July 26, 2014. And then then Miguel Cotto didn't fight for a year, and he had the WBC middleweight belt, and he fought Daniel Gill next, the one who Triple G just beat in his most recent fight. In that time, Triple G beat Rubio, Martin Murray, and Willie Monroe. So if there's anyone to say that someone was ducking, it was Cotto ducking Triple G, because Triple G in that time where Cotto took a year to fight, he fought 3 guys, beat them all by knockout, and then Cotto fights the guy that Triple G beat 3 fights previous. So it doesn't really make sense in that. So if anyone, it was Cotto that was ducking Triple G. And then who knows, but Cotto was saying, oh, you have to come down to 155 for the middleweight belt, whatever they were doing with that. But I'm sure Triple G would have done that. But I think it was Miguel Cotto, if anyone. And then at the end of that, because Cotto was at the same time waiting probably for the Canelo fight. And that's the fight he got. But they didn't fight until October or November of 2015. So that's almost a year and a half later before since the Martinez fight. So if anyone, I think it was Cotto, if someone was ducking.
Right. And if I remember correctly, there was a first round of negotiations between Cotto and Canelo. And then I think that's how that Daniel Gill fight happened. And then they ended up fighting down the line. Because I remember they weren't able to come to terms initially. Right. So, Canelo kind of comes on a little bit later. These are all great points, and it's like you said, Nopo, I think you were saying, over the phone, Martinez says something along the lines of you don't, what's Martinez saying about the belts, bro? I forget off the top of my head.
Yeah, because they were asking him how he felt about giving being only given like a 10-day period to decide whether he was going to stay at 160. So the WBO, they have all these, and I read another thing on the why they have this rule. You're only, if you can't hold the belt simultaneously, because you're taking the opportunity away from other champions that are going to fight at that weight to be champions. And it sounds nice, but we know it's all monetary, really, right?
Right, exactly.
You're taking my opportunity away from Cat making some more money, right? But that other thing sounds pretty nice too, so we could see it both ways. But the thing that Martinez said is, because they were looking for, oh, I hate the WBO. They were looking for something like that. But Martinez, very emphatically, he says, I learned this a long time ago. These sanctioning bodies, they don't award champs belts. They basically they rent you the belt. So, when they decide to take it away, they'll take it away. And that became true because, the WBC did that. I don't remember exactly, maybe Run does, what situation they had, because we know Mauricio Suleiman was Junior's godfather or something like that. So he just decides to give, I think, to let Junior, I think they stripped Martinez because, I don't know, because for some reason they strip him. Nevertheless, Martinez is still the true lineal champ. That's when this big lineal, a lot of fans ran with it and said, hey, the lineal is what matters. And, most like, in my opinion, it does matter being lineal more. But, like you said, they just basically rent you a belt and, to the highest bidder, basically,
I think for the Martinez situation, I don't really know who, because everyone's pointing fingers. There, WBC is pointing fingers at HBO. HBO was pointing fingers at the WBC. But I think Chavez fought either it was John Duddy or Sebastian Zbik for that vacant WBC belt. I think it was Beek because he came up positive for the diuretic against John Duddy, I believe. So I think it was Beek, and then that was for a vacant title. And I feel like HBO, or at least this was coming from the WBC, said that we don't want to pay for this mandatory against a no name. And Sergio Martinez didn't have the name, at least that Chavez Jr. had, even though he was more accomplished at this point. So I think that's surround sort of why because I don't know if it was officially, I think it was officially classified as Martinez dropping the belt, even though he says he was stripped. So it's sort of everyone pointing fingers at everyone. So who knows what the real, like, only ones that really know are probably Samkin Lefkowitz and then Martinez and then just the people that are involved. So who knows?
Yeah, and no, Paul, you were cooking, man. And another thing that I wanted to reference that you made a good point about was this idea that, Triple G maybe somehow felt this sense of entitlement because he was kind of like the young gun and, people need to fight me. But it's like, they feel, Martinez should just oblige this dude out of nowhere. But it's like, well, what happens when Triple G's on the other side of things? It's like you said, bro, he's not over here fighting everybody. It seems to me like Jamal Charlo wants Triple G right now. It seems to me like Andrade would take Triple G right now, but Triple G's in no rush, and it's like he has his own theories as to why, but people change their tune as time goes by. Just like Keith Thurman. Keith Thurman used to be that young up and comer, like, you need to face me. I'm the guy to see. I'll see everybody. You know what I mean? And it just happens like that, man. So the way Sergio Martinez went out, very admirable. So I'm glad that we had a chance to kind of salute him. And there's another opportunity, and it looks like Run PMC needs to get off. So Run, if you got a roll, man, we're going to wrap this one up soon, but dude, thank you so much for the breakdown, bro. And we'll see you next week.
Yeah, most definitely. Yeah. Just put in the group chat, what fight we're doing for next week. So we could watch the rescore.
Sure, man. That's the next discussion and we'll let you know, cause that's coming up right now.
Awesome.
But yeah,
see
man,
you guys later.
All right, man. Take it easy. Brother. Does anybody have any final thoughts before we discuss which controversial fight we're going to score next?
I'm loving that we're actually coming up with some actual robberies. I feel like we're doing justice and we're supporting boxing the right way. Again, I'm putting it out there as a disclaimer for boxing. If you guys want to truly overturn these controversial decisions, Al Chile is ready to step up and make it happen. So ready to knock them on out the park, man. Good stuff. And I enjoyed it. It's good times.
I enjoy it too. And we're going to have like a segment that just kind of wraps up our final thoughts on going through all these fights. But yeah, one of the things that we've learned, and we'll tell you guys, is like a lot of these fights aren't robberies. Like you go back and you're robbery. And it's like, well, damn, dude, we've gone back and we've looked at some fights that have surprised us. And it's like, are people actually going back? Like people just tend to remember it, how they remember it. And then they just want to roll with it. Like I remember even just trying to get scores for Canelo versus Lara. Like I can't tell you how many times people were ready to give me their 2 cents on what they remember. And it's like, yeah, but maybe your opinions changed. Maybe, like Sean said, maybe they need to atone. Maybe they were a hater back in the day, or they couldn't look at it objectively. We had, when we went back and we watched the Trout versus Canelo fight, we had people who changed their, their 10-9 round because or they think that Trout won that round a little, the round that Canelo knocked down Trout, and they think, oh, well, that was an even round. And now they kind of maybe have come back around and realize maybe that wasn't the right thing to do. You know what I mean? So people can come back around to fights. Like we saw, like, I think we all were kind of unanimously saying that we thought that the first Pacquiao Bradley fight really wasn't a robbery, even though, history will tell you. And if you watch those announcers, they're like, oh shit, here comes the last minute of this round. Here comes Pacquiao. But I mean, Bradley was doing a lot of good work, and it's not like the bell was saving Bradley at every round. Like, I thought a lot of those final minute rounds were maybe even fairly even, or even if Pacquiao had the advantage, like, you can't discount the first 2 minutes of activity that Bradley was actively giving. It's not like the bell was saving Bradley. So I thought that was a fair decision. It shocked me. Sometimes we surprise ourselves, but people throw around the word robbery a bit too much, at least in some of these high profile fights that we're watching. And we're working our way down, man. We only got like a handful left, and we're going to end it soon, but that's a great observation. So I'm also glad that it was a robbery, because I'm like, okay, great. Like, that's why I get happy, where it's like, well, I didn't see this one as a robbery, but if the Al Chile crew says, yes, it was, and it's either 50-50 or majority votes going towards a robbery. And ultimately, it's how we all feel independently anyways. And that's one of the other things I like about this, because then we can go, oh, what'd you think about this fight? And you'll know how you felt about it, and, objectively scoring it, so we're also learning. I'm learning a little bit about these fighters too, because I haven't seen a lot of these fights, to be honest, and so it's been a lot of fun so far. And I'm kind of sad that it's ending. Like, although sometimes it's hard work, I'm also kind of sad that we're almost done.
Yeah, and why stop the fun right there, guys? I mean, there's fights that there's historians that always talk about that. When they start talking about them, I technically only seen a couple rounds or the highlights of those fights. So, even, I mean, I'm just putting it out there. Why don't we, when we're done with our controversial thing, let's just start watching some of the historic ones and analyzing them, and talking about them. Some of the Ali fights, Marciano, all those other ones. You know what I mean? There's so many fights that we could still watch.
Yeah, I'm definitely down if you can get footage for him, which that's going to be more of the challenge once you get further down the timeline. But yeah, it's definitely been good. And the thing that I most appreciated, the fact that it's helped me have a better, more a fresh outlook on, like, I'm seeing a fight for the first time. I probably said that 100 times, but because your bias is gone, the alcohol is gone, women are gone. It's just me watching the fight, talking it over with my bros, and just like, we can respect each other. And honestly, this is not just talk. I mean, because I'm not getting paid for this, even though I'm sure the WBC is considering it. But I think that when I watch these fights and I hear your input and what you guys are saying, I respect you guys way more, your thoughts on the fight, than a lot of the people that are actually judging the fights, because a lot of them just don't see it clear, or they're not consistent, where I've kind of pretty much, I know what scores I'm going to get out of you guys pretty much. I understand how you guys are scoring, and that's cool to me. I think that's how it should be.
That goes both ways, man.
And the actual judges, they're affected by the emotions that go into these buildups their damn selves. You know what I mean? They're employed by somebody, and that somebody might not employ them again if they don't score it the way that they like. So there's a lot of ways to look at all this. Same thing as the ref. If the ref is biased towards a certain fighter and he happens to be against the guy that he's actually getting paid by, there's a lot of ways to look at it. A lot of times, even the ref could be in there partially, telling another guy you can't clinch, or telling another guy that no, it's okay to clinch, and that sort of thing. When there's a lot of fighters that use the clinching to their advantage, there's other fighters that use other things to their advantage. So there's a lot of ways to look at fights.
Oh, definitely.
A lot of things to consider.
Nando here says that he was definitely a Canelo skeptic. Yeah, dude, I hear you, man. It's okay, man. I'm glad you could just admit it. It happens, man. We were all skeptics at one point. It just becomes the point where you kind of go, okay, then you finally just kind of come around, and then maybe you can go back and analyze some of those older fights. That's all. Everybody has their own timeline. I've said when I kind of started warming up, Sean has his moment, Dave 408 has his moment, so I mean, everybody has their moments, dude. And Ricardo Martinez said, I heard people crying that Gary got robbed. Well, the official like Al Chile, controversial rescore crew, I think we can all agree that it was no robbery. I don't think it's worth going back to revisit. Although I did hear something that I thought was interesting. All of a sudden, I was hearing that, well, you have to beat the champ to be the champ. You got to take it from the champ. And that was kind of a newer one. Like, I've kind of felt that way historically, but although watching some of these controversial rescores, like, my opinion on that has kind of changed a bit. Like, I think it depends on the champion, although Gary Russell was the longest reigning, but maybe not most consecutive defenses. And to me, consecutive defenses is more important. If you're spreading out your fights, I mean, that kind of counts on as far as like, calendar days goes, but to me, consecutive defense is a little more impressive. So as far as maybe taking it from the champ, does Gary Russell deserve that consideration? I think that's all a matter of personal opinion.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I don't think that's something that should actually go into the actual scoring, because then that leads to strictly to bias, and that's what we're trying to avoid. We just want the results to be left alone and what they are. If a person, whether it's 7-5 or 8-4, and that is close, because that could, have potentially a lot of swing rounds in it. If you win, you win. And that's what we want ultimately boxing to be, like the end result to be the result, and to kind of to remove the whole cloud of doubt of, oh, I wanted to be more impressive. A win's a win. I mean, the fight we talked about right now with, the guy saying about the Maxio, I mean, he should have done more. He did enough, and he's got the belt now. And to me, that's good enough. I mean, that's what, it is what it is. I mean, you want it to be more impressive, but that's what going back and looking at these fights have shown me is like, either you did or you didn't. You're in or you're out. And I think too much of that gray has kind of caused a lot of issues with boxing overall, but I don't want to get on a soapbox. But I think less is more to me. Don't overthink it. You did or you didn't.
Exactly. And that's one of the cool things about going back and watching these controversial fights, is because we all know that it's going to decision, but we don't know how the fight's going to turn out. And that's kind of a cool thing to go back and find, because it's hard to go back and watch a classic fight where you don't know what the result's going to be. I mean, we might know what it is officially because it's coined a robbery, so we know that it's officially considered a robbery, but we don't know how we're actually going to view the fight, and as far as like, kind of taking it from the champ, the only thing I'd like to add to that is I also agree that, a fighter who wins the fight should be given the nod. But I think sometimes people might be thinking about, well, what if it's truly like a swing around? I mean, does the defending champion get any benefit of the doubt, in your opinion, Sean?
Oh.
You're on mute, sir.
I think they definitely do. I mean, I think that's kind of led to a lot of the challenges that we've had. Some of these scores were like, whoa, and then we're like, oh, well, the house fighter, and it doesn't have to get to that championship level of fights we're talking about. I mean, I'm talking about amateurs, I'm talking about going to some of these bigger tournaments. Anytime where someone is the house fighter, these club fights, they're going to get the nod because they're going to get the preferential treatment. They're going to lean that way because they're kind of pulling for them. The fights, they're going to hear the crowd, that emotion is drawn in. And, that's why I've always been a proponent of having a fourth judge in the booth, somebody that can see the whole ring. They can see everything. They could, tunnel vision. They cannot be, kind of swayed by the crowd or the emotion, even though they're there, and just have them. They could be like, with, another sport, NFL. They could be there like in New York or somewhere and just watching the fight and score. And that way can kind of eliminate some of these draws that we're seeing and some of these inconclusive decisions that we're seeing that aren't, decisive enough. But that's just my 2 cents, because even though I obviously love the historical aspect of boxing, but for us to move forward and continue to grow as a sport, that's what we ultimately want to do to get more people in there. We got to be creative as far as making it less confusing, as far as like, well, how come he didn't win? It looked like he threw more punches and he did this and that. And, oh, well, because the other guy's a champion, to give him the benefit of the doubt. Well, that's stupid. If he didn't win, he didn't win. So I think you just got to quit overthinking it and just saying, oh, well, that's just the way it is. No, if it have an opportunity for something good to be better, why not do it? And I think we should embrace that change more. And I think that could definitely help the sport grow the right way, if, because that's what we want to see.
Well said, Gringo. No, Paul, you got anything on this before we pick our next controversial rescore fight?
No, man. Great idea. Fourth judge, man. Somewhere disclosed location. You know what I mean? It's a good one, Gringo.
No, I hear you. The only other thing I want to say is like I think sometimes people put too much into CompuBox stats, and sometimes I've seen them where I don't even necessarily agree with them. And I've seen a website that goes back and actually slowly rescores these, and you could tell that the numbers there's a disparity between what somebody sees live. I mean, you could tell with announcers where they tell you, oh, this guy, oh, he hit him with the left, but it was actually the other guy that connected. Or you just see it differently, and the judges have to deal with that too. You know what I mean? I'm sure they're supposed to have fast eyes and be able to see stuff, but I mean, sometimes, especially at the lower weights, shit's happening so quickly, you don't even know what the hell's going on,
Absolutely.
And to keep track of the ebb and flow of the entire round and like who you think won the overall round. But let's get to it, man. I'm going to take a look at this list. So I'm looking at a screen while you guys see me. So we have some remaining controversial fights that are available. I got some that are saved, but we got a pretty nice little list. So we have this list, and Sean, let's go with you, man. You're going to pick this next one for us. So please let us know what you think about these.
All right.
We have Carlos Zarate versus Lumpe Pintor, which is a 118-pound fight. Pernell Whitaker versus Jose Luis Ramirez at 135. Pacquiao versus Horn, that's a 147. And then these three are at 160. We got Oscar De La Hoya versus Felix Sturm. Sergio Martinez versus Martin Murray. James Toney versus Dave Tiberi. And then we have three heavyweight fights. We have George Foreman versus Shannon Briggs. Muhammad Ali versus Jimmy Young. And Muhammad Ali versus Ken Norton 3. And the only thing I have to say about the Muhammad Ali options is like I think it'd be good to do the Jimmy Young first because that's the first controversial, quote unquote, controversial one and then after that is the Ken Norton fight.
Oh man, that's an awesome list, and looks like we're going to be going out in style. But for me, what stands out, one that I like to do, I haven't scored a De La Hoya fight with you guys, so
okay,
that'd be fun for me.
Yeah, dude, that sounds good. I'd like to. And it's on next week. We're doing Oscar De La Hoya versus Felix Sturm. Do you have any memories about this particular fight, either of you guys?
The memory that comes to my head right away is when they've asked De La Hoya if he ever thought that he was gifted a decision. He right away says it with Felix Sturm. So he kind of feels like he knows he lost that fight. So don't let that sway your judgment though, or your judging.
I remember Oscar looking soft in this fight, body-wise. And I think I remember the commentators talking about it too. So he's not like at his physical peak. And then on top of that too, like I remember Oscar kind of dancing around at the end of rounds, like trying to steal rounds. Like I would classify them as like stealing rounds. I remember that about that particular fight. And then also I remember Sturm feeling very confident with what he was doing in there. So I'm glad that we're going back and assessing this particular fight because this was a controversial fight. I don't know how I'm going to score it. I only watched it once and I didn't watch it live. And I remember thinking that Sturm won the fight, but we'll see. I'm looking forward to it.
No, those are some great points, and actually, shout out to both of you guys. It does. I actually remember the commentator saying that he looked doughy. Yeah,
and he did for Oscar. You know what I mean? Well, I mean, yeah, it was a higher weight class for Oscar. We all know what happened ultimately. I mean, it wasn't the greatest middleweight. I mean, but it was cool that he went up there and he tried to reach for it. I mean, well, I guess he won. He was a champion there. And I think Run PMC can tell us, but I mean, if this was for the belt, I mean, this was the belt that he got. And when that particular sanctioning body wasn't one of like the major four yet, it was like kind of like, and then Hopkins and De La Hoya fought, right? And then boom, then it became like the four major sanctioning bodies. But Hopkins was already like the lineal middleweight champ, so there's some good history here, so I guess we're still kind of following that we're still talking about that middleweight lineal line,
So this was a WBA belt, right? And it was for middleweight 160, right?
I think so. I'll have to double check, but yeah, it was.
That rings a bell.
Yeah,
I think it'd be cool to do, because obviously they have that new special DAZN that came out about the war between him and Chavez, and so maybe we can even touch on that next week as well. Just trying to keep some different things for our fans and supporters that are checking out the show. Appreciate you guys so much. It's been a fun ride, man. One of our longer shows, but actually one of my favorite. Just keeping it real, man.
Yeah. Thanks, man. We appreciate it. We appreciate having you, brother. And then Ricardo Martinez says Castillo versus Floyd won. Well, I can tell you, Ricardo Martinez, that the El Chile crew, we did score that one. We took a look at it, and we all felt that it was not a robbery. I actually had Floyd winning that fight. I think a couple people had Castillo winning that fight, but we all agreed it was not necessarily a robbery. I don't know. I think Floyd gets a bad rap in that one. I thought he won every time I've seen it. I thought he won, but that's just me, but that's one of the cool things, man. Everybody's entitled to their own opinion. And the other thing that I want to talk about right before we leave is like, I noticed that we've just been stalling on scoring Muhammad Ali's fights. Like, Is it because he's a legend? I find myself wondering if it's like, do we just not want to go there because we don't want to think that maybe like the greatest was given those favorable nods too? It's just something that we just don't really want to talk about because we don't want to take away from the luster of the great Muhammad Ali. Like, what do you guys think? Or is it just by chance that we're not picking Muhammad Ali fights?
Well, for me, that's a big part of it.
Right.
You don't want, maybe it's too strong of a word, but it's almost sacrilegious. I could see a lot of backlash and, I don't know, feel dirty kind of doing it. Like, oh man. And then there's, like you said, there's 3 of them too. So you can't just like get it out the way. Oh, just hurry up and score it. And there's another one after that, another one after that. But hey, like, when I was growing up, my mom would say to eat your vegetables first. So maybe we should have done them first to get them out the way. But me is definitely a respect factor. And I don't want to taint the legacy. But Muhammad Ali's Muhammad Ali, man. We just, he's the greatest. And he's just bigger than boxing. He's an icon. So it definitely does wane on my avoidance.
Right. And me too, but we're going to have to face it eventually because, hell, it's like Ricardo Martinez says, we're going to keep the same energy and that's what we intend to do. So eventually, yeah, we're going to do it, and also too, like, that's part of the reason, like, why I've never really been in a rush to score those fights. And plus, I just have this idea in my head of Ali kind of being like, just like not the same Ali anymore who's getting these decisions, right? Although I believe that Jimmy Young fights less than a year after the third Joe Frazier fight. So, I mean, and he's in his early 30s. So it's not like the guy's ancient. Actually, he still had a good number of wins afterwards, right? So, but it's just like our memory. We just don't want to taint that, but we're going to have to face it eventually, and while I was working on the slides for this show, I actually watched the first Ken Norton versus Ali fight. And some people think that Ken Norton won all 3 of those fights. And from what I saw, I didn't score, but I'll tell you this, like if Ken Norton gets better, then Ali's in real trouble because I definitely had Ken Norton winning some rounds in that first fight. I didn't score it, but I could have easily seen that fight going to Ken Norton. On top of that, I thought the scoring was weird. Okay, so there was in the 70s, right, in California, and they had this scoring system of like every fighter can earn up to like 4 to 5 points in a round. Okay, so that's how you mark it. So it's like, oh, this fighter gets 2 points in this round. I'm going to give this fighter 5 points in this round, and at the end, you do a complete tally of everything. So I had never heard of that. So, I mean, that just maybe shows my lack of knowledge historically, but I'd never heard of a scoring system like that. I don't know if it's like that for the third Ken Norton Ali fight, but I thought that was pretty interesting.
No, in fact, I have to look into that too. I mean, you have to prepare yourself to, do accordingly, especially toward the point systems that were in place during that time. So, hey, maybe we should just bite the bullet and just do it'll be a long show, but just do an Ali special, just go all in. You know what I mean? Whenever we have enough time to do it. But I have no time to start watching them now. And I've been hearing that for a while. That's kind of like one of those underlying rumors that those Ken Norton fights were Ken Norton wins. I've been hearing that.
You know what?
I've been hearing that.
See, it just shows you how much I respect Ali because I wanted to say, like, being more candid, I just want to say, like, yeah, dude, I thought Ken Norton was kind of winning the fight from what I saw. Like, I didn't score it round per round, but like if you're doing that tally system or even round by round, like, I mean, maybe Ali would have gotten a little lucky with that one, possibly. But at the time, the only person he lost to was Joe Frazier. So it's like, I mean, it happens to everybody. So, I mean, but it's interesting how history, and I'm going to wrap this up, fellas, but all I want to say is like, it's interesting how history tends to forget things, like for instance, with Chavez, I can't tell you, Chavez, 89-0. 89-0. Well, it's like, well, nobody talks about the fact that he was given a couple gifts, right? Like for sure, at least one, right? Except for Nopal. I know what Nopal thinks, right? But I think it was a gift, right? On top of that, too, nobody talks about this. Officially, Chavez had a loss early on in his record that just kind of got wiped. It was from a disqualification. But hell, the O looks pretty, so they just kind of ignored it, and then just life went on, and then all of a sudden he was like this huge 89-0, 89-0. So it's like, well, if we could talk about, if you talk about Canelo's record, man, fucking people pull out the Rolodex talking about how they felt about every fight, so I mean, we should treat Ali with the same respect. Because I mean, if we're trying to talk about, well, is Canelo one of the, is he the greatest of the generation? Will he be an all-time great? We're talking about all-time greats like Pernell Whitaker, all-time greats like Julio Cesar Chavez. Well, then, we're going to address the great Muhammad Ali very shortly. But next, we got Oscar De La Hoya versus Felix Sturm. Y'all tune into that one. And then I want to thank everybody for showing up, man. We love talking boxing with you all. And then we'll see you all next week. Peace.
Peace out, guys.